Mom, actually. I looked down at my daughter, Lucy, in surprise. It was the first time she had called me Mom. Lucy, my husband's child from a previous marriage, hadn't warmed up to me all over the past year. But now, she had called me that for the first time. I almost teared up as she reached out her right hand to me. In her open palm lay a single ring. "What's this?" On closer inspection, it was a wedding ring. Judging by its size, it belonged to a woman. "It's for Mom, who gave birth to me." I squatted down in front of a trembling, downcast Lucy. "You're real Mom's, huh? Do you want to meet her?" My husband was overseas on a business trip. I gently asked, thinking she must be feeling lonely with just the two of us, strangers, at home. "No. I want you to throw this away." "What?" "As you know." As I listened to Lucy, I could feel myself getting enveloped in anger. I should leave, shouldn't I? I hugged my 10-year-old daughter, who had come to such a conclusion, tightly. Stroking Lucy's crying head, I whispered softly, "Tell her tomorrow, as you wish. I won't let anyone make my daughter cry. She'll get what she deserves. My name is Kate, I'm 29 years old. I got married last year and am now a stay-at-home wife. My husband, Mike, is 37 years old, and this is a second marriage for both of us. We met at work. Aside from the fact that the workplace was my father's company, it was a very normal relationship between colleagues. By the time I joined, he had already divorced his previous wife, but he was a very reliable presence as a colleague. Lucy, his daughter from that marriage, is 10 years old. Even a year after marrying Mike, she hasn't warmed up to me at all. Lucy would answer when I asked her something. She would eat her meals without leaving anything behind. But she never initiated conversation with me or talked about school or her friends. I suppose it's part of being a teenager, but it still made me feel lonely. I heard that the divorce with Lucy's real mother, and was bitter. She drank a lot and was unfaithful. Mike had said that if it weren't for Lucy, he would have divorced her much sooner. Sometimes when he came home late at night, the house would be empty. There were several occasions when Lucy, still a preschooler at the time, was left home alone, crying. So, they fought often. Lucy, seeing her parents like this, kept crying and saying she didn't want them to separate. Lucy was really pitiable back then, Mike had said. Certainly, being left alone, feeling lonely and scared, crying. Then, because of that, seeing her parents fighting. It was a time when she should have been more and more spoiled by her mom. Instead of just playing, laughing with friends, being unconditionally loved by her parents, and going to sleep happily every night. When she was in kindergarten, those days should have been the norm. I wanted to tell and to her face that she was a failure as a mother. On the day Lucy became a second grader and disappeared, leaving only the ring and a signed divorce petition on the table. The breakfast dishes were left unwashed, and the laundry was undone. Lucy probably didn't even know what a divorce petition was. Thinking about Lucy waiting for her mother's return in such a home made me feel unbearable. A year later, Mike was raising Lucy alone. Even before that, Mike often taught me a lot about work and helped me out. So, I tried to take some of his work off his shoulders and stayed late with him so he could go home earlier. But it wasn't just me. Everyone helped Mike, who was capable and kind at work. When the elementary school called to say Lucy had a high fever, I was the one who made a fuss. "Please go home early. It's pitiful she's running a fever." "But I have a meeting this afternoon, at least let me make an apology call." "Manager, it's okay if he leaves now, right? I'll make the apology call to the meeting attendees." My voice seemed to echo down the hallway. "I'll explain to the meeting attendees myself," said my father, who happened to be passing by in the hallway, allowing Mike to leave immediately. After work, I also visited Lucy to cheer her up, and this event brought Mike and me even closer than before. Knowing his accomplishments and character at the company, my parents didn't oppose my marriage to Mike, who had a history of divorce, at all. I think of Lucy as my real family. But reality is harsh. Contrary to my feelings, even a year after getting married, Lucy hadn't warmed up to me. But, on the night Mike left for an overseas business trip, Lucy approached me. "Mom, actually." I stopped what I was doing in the kitchen and turned around. I looked down at Lucy, incredulous. Finally, she had called me that for the first time. Tears welled up in my eyes. I almost burst into tears. Sniffling, I looked at Lucy's right hand that she held out to me. In her open palm was a small ring. "What's this?" It was a wedding ring upon closer inspection. Likely belonging to a woman. "It's from the mom who gave birth to me." I wiped my hands on my apron and squatted down in front of Lucy, who was looking down and trembling. Even if she was a terrible mother, she might still be important to Lucy. My husband was overseas on a business trip and would be away for a while. I gently asked, thinking she must be feeling lonely with just the two of us, strangers, at home. "So she's your real mom, huh? Do you want to meet her?" But Lucy shook her head. "I want you to throw this away." "What? Why?" I asked, puzzled by her sudden request. "I met Mom yesterday." "Yesterday? When yesterday?" "After school." "Not just yesterday. I've seen Mom several times on my way home from school, asking about my new mom. Even when I say I don't know, she keeps asking." "About me?" I wondered why. The last bit of maternal love? Did she want to make sure her daughter was being taken care of? My thoughts were completely betrayed. "The new mom, you're rich, right? I heard Dad works for the company owned by your father, right?" Chills ran down my spine. An indescribable sense of disgust rose within me. "Anything else? Didn't she say anything else?" "She said she met Dad too. Told him to hand over Lucy or bring money. But it seems Dad doesn't have much money. Next, she said she'd tell the new mom, so you should make a fuss about not wanting to go." Lucy started crying. I felt myself getting enveloped in anger. I should leave, shouldn't I? I hugged my 10-year-old daughter, who had come to such a conclusion, tightly. Stroking Lucy's crying head, I whispered softly, "Tell her tomorrow, as you wish. I won't recognize such a person as a mother. I won't let anyone make my daughter cry. She'll get what she deserves." That night, after Lucy went to sleep, I called Mike. I wanted to confirm what Lucy had told me today. "It's true. I didn't tell Kate because I didn't want to worry her, but to ambush Lucy. I didn't know she was meeting Lucy too. This is the first I've heard. But I did ask Lucy if she wanted to live with her previous mom. She's no good, but she is Lucy's real mother. However, Lucy said no. She wants to stay here. So, I thought I'd handle it myself. It seems she's been coming to meet Lucy quite often." Anne. I could feel Mike's anger through the phone. "I understand how you feel. Anyway, I'll go meet and with Lucy on the next school holiday." Mike sounded panicked at my words. "Wait. Can't you wait until I return home?" "It's impossible. That woman made Lucy cry. I can't stay silent any longer." "Don't worry, Mike," I said and hung up. The next day, while organizing my room, Lucy came back from school.
How was it? Was she there today? Did she give you the note?
Yes. She said to make sure to come on Saturday at 10 a.m.
Good. Thank you.
The note I specified was for a meeting at a cafe on Saturday, a school holiday, with the three of us. She'll come thinking she'll just get money without any suspicion. Seeing Lucy's downcast face,
Then let's go buy some clothes to wear,
I suggested.
eh? Yes, we have to dress up. Since Saturday will be the last day you'll see her.
I confirmed with Lucy, who was frozen.
Are you really okay with not seeing her anymore?
Yes. I don't want to see someone who troubles Dad and Mom anymore. Lucy answered firmly with determined eyes.
Then I'll get ready, so go wash your hands and gargle. There's a snack in the fridge.
I watched Lucy run energetically to the washroom and started putting the old books I had taken out into a paper bag. Lucy and I, dressed in clothes that anyone could tell were from high-end brands at a glance, headed to the cafe for our appointment. I wouldn't normally choose clothes this way. Whether expensive or cheap, I want to dress Lucy in clothes that suit her, that she likes. But today alone, even this serves as an attack on the other party.
Lucy, no matter what I say or what she says, will you trust me?
After nodding, Lucy and I entered the cafe hand in hand, confidently. Oh, Lucy. Dressed in such nice clothes. They suit you well. Anne, who had arrived earlier, said with a broad smile upon seeing Lucy. Come sit next to me. Ignoring Anne's words, Lucy sat next to me. Anne's face twitched slightly, but she managed a smile. I too smiled and deliberately placed a heavy paper bag and a branded bag in front of Lucy.
Keep an eye on this, it's important.
Anne's eyes changed. She stared at the paper bag, thinking it contained luxury bags and money. I ordered coffee for myself and a cake set for Lucy. After introducing ourselves, I quickly brought up the topic. So you want to take Lucy back? That's right. She's my dear daughter, after all. I want to raise her myself. Is that so? I heard from Mike that, Kate, you've been treating Lucy like your own daughter, haven't you?
Yes, of course.
And so, it pains me to take Lucy away from you. Instead, I was thinking, maybe I could receive something in return, you know? I pretended to be confused and tilted my head. In return? What kind of? You know what I mean. Sorry, I'm not quite familiar with these things. There was a silence, and I sipped my coffee. To Lucy, who had been looking down at her mobile phone.
Eat up. It's delicious.
I encouraged her to eat the cake in front of her, and was getting irritated by our behavior. After a while of silence, she leaned forward.
Come on, money, money. Money?
I asked back loudly, pretending to be surprised. And frowned. Obviously. Anne sighed. As if it's a big deal to give up my precious daughter. That sort of compensation. At that point. No. I interrupted.
I am a woman too. I understand how precious a child is to a mother. I have no intention of taking Lucy away from Anne. Eh?
And was dumbfounded, and Lucy, surprised, dropped her fork and looked up at me. I picked up the fork that had fallen on the table and handed it back to Lucy. Was she feeling betrayed? Though it pained my heart to think so, I decided to trust Lucy, who had nodded her trust in me.
What are you saying? Therefore, if Anne and Lucy wish, I will return Lucy to Anne. I'll also help persuade Mike.
Anne, as if in disbelief.
Wait a minute.
Laughed. She looked at Lucy anxiously.
Lucy, what about you? You don't want to be separated from Kate and Dad, right?
She said, almost assuming. Lucy looked at Anne, then at me, before looking down. Then she raised her head. Either is fine. And started looking at her mobile phone screen again.
Are you stupid?
And slammed the table. Lucy looked up.
Then I'll take child support. $10,000. No, that's not enough. First, give me $50,000.
And was desperate. Gradually losing composure, her true nature was showing. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms leisurely.
That's not for Anne to decide, right? There's a set method for calculating that. Whether to pay more than that is something Mike should discuss. It's not for me to pay,
I stated clearly. Anne, who had thought she could easily get money, was getting increasingly frustrated. But I faced her squarely without changing my expression. This is just the beginning. I'll press on from here. So that you never appear before Lucy again. You told Lucy, right?
As you wish.
Yes.
You haven't done it at all. His father is the president of a company, right? Money should be no object.
As Anne's voice grew louder.
People are watching,
I whispered, glancing around, and clamped her mouth shut. I dramatically sighed before speaking.
What are you saying? I confirmed it with you first, didn't I? You said you wanted to take Lucy back, that you wanted to raise her yourself. So, I offered my support. Is there something wrong with that? Something wrong, you say?
Anne's lips quivered. I pressed on further.
Also, I have a question. How do you plan to support Lucy? Child support is meant to cover the necessary expenses for Lucy's life, right? It's not meant to be spent on your luxuries. You are the one supposed to cover the basic living expenses.
That's what I said.
That's ridiculous. That man ran off with a younger woman, leaving me behind. Lucy, if it comes to this, you're coming with me. If you don't want to suffer, cry with me and beg this woman. Ask her to pay money to Mom.
Her desperation was unseemly. Living selfishly, always depending on someone else without trying to make an effort. And to think she claims to have been betrayed in the end, it was her own fault.
So, let me get this straight. You have no intention of raising Lucy, but you said you wanted to take her back because you want money?
And didn't answer. Just glared at me.
I'll keep harassing you until I get the money. I'll even go to Lucy's school. I'll claim that despite being her mother, I was robbed of her. I'll scream in front of your house and make sure the neighbors see your shame.
And growled in a low voice, no longer caring about appearances.
Enough is enough.
I reached for the bag in front of Lucy and pulled out a small voice recorder. I turned it off and showed it to Anne.
That's a clear threat. And with this, no one will think to give you custody, income aside.
And, frustrated, stood up and reached out to snatch the voice recorder from me. I pulled the recorder away to prevent it from being taken. A hand reached out from the side and grabbed Anne's wrist. Both Anne and I looked in that direction.
Dad!
Lucy's voice echoed in the cafe.
Mike? What are you doing here?
And was astonished. I too wanted to know why Mike was here. Mike returned Anne's call with a cold look.
If you try to harm my wife, I'll sue you.
It was the first time I saw Mike speak so sternly.
Dad!
He gently stroked Lucy's head as she hugged him.
Mike, the business trip?
Wondering how he could be here when he was supposed to be overseas.
How could I not come back for a family emergency?
He smiled. Then he turned his gaze back to Anne.
When will you realize? As a mother, you're no longer accepted by your daughter. Your behavior is despicable.
Despite the anger in his voice, Mike spoke calmly. But even this must have been a severe blow to Anne. It might have been more effective than any of my arguments. And looked down for a while, trembling with frustration.
At least,
she muttered something low, reaching out and pulled the paper bag toward herself.
Then at least give me this.
Anne clutched the bag.
Sure.
I easily agreed.
I was planning to sell it to a second-hand bookstore anyway, so if you'd like, please take it.
At my words,
and
let out. Upon checking the contents,
I don't want these dirty books.
Her reaction was exactly as I had anticipated. I secretly sighed, thinking there was no saving her.
Ah!
Lucy rushed to pick up a book that had fallen to the floor, dusting each one off. Poor thing. She put them back in the bag. I stood up and squatted next to Lucy.
The books are happy to be treated with care. These were given to me by Grandpa.
From Grandpa?
Grandpa's not around anymore, but I thought he'd forgive me if I had to give them away today. But since Anne doesn't want them, would you like them, Lucy?
Lucy looked up.
Yes. I'll treasure them.
And smiled happily.
That's good. They are all first editions, some worth more than $10,000 each.
The one most startled by my words was Anne.
Really? I'll take those books then. You said you'd give them to me, right?
As Anne stood up, Mike sighed. He grabbed her shoulder and made her sit again.
You never learn. These are now Lucy's. Mike, please. Convince Kate. I really have no money. I don't care. But I'll pay for what we had here.
Mike took the check and my bag.
Let's go,
he said to us. Then, turning back to Anne.
I'll say this one more time. If you harass my wife or daughter again, I will indeed sue you.
We apologized to the cafe staff for the disturbance and left. Mike had managed to return from his trip by pushing through the arrangements. The mobile phone Lucy had been fiddling with was used to stay in touch with Mike since then, and has not shown her face to Lucy or me. However, she did visit Mike once after he returned from his business trip. She was evicted from her apartment because she couldn't pay the rent. She showed up in dirty clothes with 2 bags, begging for help with only $100 to her name. When Mike refused and told her to live more responsibly, she cursed him out before breaking down and crying like a child. Since that day, Lucy and I have been like real mother and daughter. She helps with preparing dinner and even with the laundry. It's not that she feels she has to help, but rather she enjoys spending time with me. And most importantly, we talk a lot more. Before you married Dad, you came to visit me when I was sick, remember?
Yes. I had heard about Lucy, but that was the first time we actually met.
Mom was really worried about me that day, so kind. I thought it would be nice if she could be my mom.
So why didn't you warm up to me sooner?
I asked, and it seems she was afraid that it would be harder to part if she got taken back by Anne.
You didn't have to worry about that. I'm your mom, and I'll always protect you.
I promised.
From now on, feel free to talk to me and rely on me for anything. Yes.
My daughter's cheerful response filled me with joy.
I can't trust you to take care of Mom anymore.
Standing next to Georgie, who said this with a stern expression, Sophia is nodding over and over with a smug smile.
I, too, think it's better if we live with Georgie and his wife.
So, I want you to move out as soon as possible. Hearing those words, I felt my heart go cold. Anger bubbled up within me towards Sophia, who had always ordered me around, and towards Georgie and his wife, who had never lifted a finger to help. Seeing me like this, Georgie looked down on me with displeasure.
What's with that look? A disgrace who can't even properly care for Mom, acting all high and mighty.
My name is Olivia. I'm 32 years old and work for a major IT company. I live at my parents' house with my father, Kevin, and my mother, Sophia, both 62 years old. I have a very good relationship with Kevin, who has a solid personality. He introduced me to fishing, a hobby of ours, and we often go fishing together on weekends. On the other hand, Sophia has a free-spirited nature. Whenever I planned to relax at home on weekends, she would suddenly barge into my room saying,
"We're going on a trip right now. Get ready immediately."
Without listening to my opinion, she'd take me on trips on a whim, which happened quite frequently. My family also includes my older brother, Georgie, who is 3 years my senior. Like Sophia, Georgie acts before thinking, so his personality clashes with my cautious nature. We fought constantly as children, resulting in a strained sibling relationship. When Georgie and I would fight, Sophia often intervened to mediate, but she has always favored Georgie, telling me I was in the wrong and that I should apologize to him. Now that we're adults, we've stopped fighting, but looking back, it feels like Sophia always preferred Georgie. Georgie ended up marrying Cindy, a colleague from his work, 5 years ago after she became pregnant. This led him to move out of the house. There had been talk of living together, but Cindy refused, so that idea fell through, leaving Kevin, Sophia, and me to live as a trio. 4 years ago, Kevin died in a truck accident while at work. The sudden loss left me emotionally unstable, unable to cope, and it took me a long time to recover. But the shock of losing Kevin was even more profound for Sophia than it was for me. Sophia, who had been a housewife, stopped doing any household chores and secluded herself in her room after the accident. Then, misfortune continued when Sophia misstepped on the house's stairs, tumbling down and suffering severe injuries. Thankfully, it wasn't life-threatening, but she became physically dependent on care. Sophia, further disheartened by her injuries, not only secluded herself in her room but also stopped eating the meals I prepared. When I saw her after a long time, she had become emaciated. Thus, believing this situation wasn't good for Sophia, I resolved to use Kevin's inheritance and my savings to build a barrier-free house that would make living easier for Sophia. The construction proceeded smoothly and, while not a mansion, a functional, barrier-free house suitable for caring for Sophia was completed. Sophia seemed to like it very much and gradually began to regain her usual cheerfulness. Moreover, she couldn't walk around freely, but she started coming out of her room, sitting on the porch to relax. Since then, I've been living busy days, juggling work, household chores, and caring for Sophia. One day after work, I came home to find Georgie and his wife visiting with their child. And the laughter of Sophia and Georgie filled the entrance.
"I'm home." "Oh, big brother, you're here. Welcome."
As I greeted them, Georgie, seeing me just home, said he wanted to talk. After changing from my suit into casual clothes, I headed to the living room where Georgie and the others were waiting.
"What's all this formality about? What's going on?"
I asked, and Georgie cheerfully responded.
"We were just discussing, and we've decided to live with Mom."
"So, Olivia, you need to leave this house." Despite refusing to live together when they got married, this sudden change of policy and the declaration of living with Sophia, along with the unreasonable demand for me to leave, left me unable to comprehend.
This house isn't built for two families. With the child and all, we won't have enough rooms. So, Olivia, you need to leave. Besides, you're 32, right? It's not good to keep relying on your parents and living at home forever.
That's right, Olivia. How can you not see that you're being a burden to Sophia? As an adult, you should have realized this without us having to say anything. It's time to stop depending on your parents and become independent. While I was being unilaterally criticized by Georgie and Cindy, I wanted to argue that I wasn't actually depending on my parents.
To be honest, I've always wanted to live with Georgie and the rest. He's our precious eldest son, after all. And Olivia, you've always been so cautious and slow. It's been frustrating to watch. Plus, I could never tell what you were thinking, which was creepy.
Sophia suddenly came out with her desire to live with Georgie and their family and revealed what she really thought of me.
Besides, even now, Olivia, you hardly do any housework because you're always busy with work. There's no point in living with Olivia, who is useless. Now that Georgie and his family have said they'll live with me, you should quickly pack your things and leave.
Sophia saw me not as a family member but merely as a convenient housekeeper. Due to my work commitments and coming home late during busy periods, I couldn't adequately keep up with household chores, prompting the suggestion that I leave. I could forgive the harsh words from Georgie and Cindy, but Sophia's words deeply wounded me. Since Kevin passed away, I've struggled to support Sophia, pushing through my fatigue after work to take care of the household and provide care for Sophia. Moreover, Georgie and his wife were living far from the house, so I couldn't rely on them for support. Additionally, my workplace is a bit far from home, requiring a considerable commute time. My job does not accommodate remote work, so I commute daily by train. I had thought many times about moving closer to my company after Kevin died. Yet, despite Sophia's profound grief over losing Kevin and her need for care, I chose to support her. But to her, it seems I was just a housekeeper. Feeling betrayed by Sophia, sadness and anger began to swell within me.
Busy with work and can't even take proper care of Mom, huh? Really, you're such a disgrace. You're failing as a family member. Stop half-assing it and just pack your bags and leave if you're that incompetent.
Hey, Georgie, don't you think calling her a failure as a family member is too much? Don't worry, Olivia. We'll live together and take perfect care of Sophia, just you watch.
Oh, Cindy, that's so reassuring. Unlike Olivia, you make me feel secure. This is how a family should be.
These words from Georgie and the others unleashed the pent-up anger and sadness within me. Understood. I'll get everything sorted and leave you to your freedom. Suppressing various emotions, I said just that and returned to my room. As I ascended the stairs to my room, the voices of Sophia and the others, gossiping about me, could still be heard from the living room. It seemed I was the only one who thought of us as a family. It appeared the others did not consider me part of theirs. Realizing this, the suppressed feelings of anger, sadness, and frustration came flooding back. After entering my room and closing the door, I decided to make a significant phone call, harboring strong emotions. 2 weeks after I left the house, I received a call from Georgie.
Hey. Mom isn't doing any household chores at all. What's going on?
According to Georgie, Sophia wasn't taking care of the house or the children at all, leaving them in a bind. I had assumed this would be the case since Sophia hadn't been doing chores even when I was living there, but it seems Cindy had different expectations. It turns out Cindy had hoped that, despite needing some care, Sophia's condition wasn't serious and that she could handle household chores and look after the grandchildren, allowing Cindy to take it easy. I couldn't help but feel astounded by Cindy's overly optimistic thinking and Georgie's complaints, despite agreeing to it so readily.
There was no way living together and relying on Mom from the start was going to work. Plus, we knew she needed care all along. What are you complaining about now?
I wasn't told she couldn't move around this much. Georgie came up with excuses like a child. And that's not all. People claiming to be from a real estate and construction company have been showing up, asking to see the house, causing us trouble. They're probably scammers, so we've been ignoring them. But they've been sending letters for a while, showing up at the house, and even calling. It's getting really annoying. Georgie said this in frustration, and I calmly replied, "Oh, that's because I hired a professional service. I've sold the house, so you'll need to move out soon." What? Why are you selling Mom's house without permission? It's our house, don't mess around. I ignored Georgie's yelling and explained that Sophia was already informed. Why do you think the house I paid to build is Mom's, let alone yours? I built it, so it's my right to sell it. The buyer wants to demolish it and the surrounding land to build condominiums. They were thrilled to buy it. Why would you do something like that on your own? We're living there right now. Is this how you treat family? Who was it that said to leave because I was useless? Besides, it's my house that I bought, so I can do whatever I want with it. As I countered Georgie, who tended to ignore inconvenient truths, he seemed to run out of arguments. Georgie suddenly changed his tone, pleading with me in a different voice. Please! We were wrong! So, stop selling the house and cancel the demolition. Talk to the company and convince them to stop. I'll even let you live here. We'll make the rent cheap and even do some of the housework. How about that? It's not a bad deal, right? I'm saying we'll welcome you back into the family. Even in this situation, Georgie seemed not to understand his position at all. Despite it being the house I bought, he's talking about charging me rent, assuming I'd do the housework, and saying they'd welcome me back into the family. I was utterly astounded by Georgie's arrogant remarks, informed him that a buyer had already been found and that the sale wouldn't be reversed, and he should leave the house without causing any more trouble for the company, then hung up. Georgie called again shortly after, but I blocked his number. Soon after, I received messages from both Cindy and Sophia, blaming me and asking to stop the sale of the house, but I replied with rejections to both and decided to block Sophia and Georgie's contacts, resolved never to see them again. A colleague who lives near the house I had built later told me about Sophia and Georgie's situation. After our call, the contractors moved in quickly to start demolishing the house. Sophia and the Georgies resisted until the end, trying to prevent the contractors from entering and spreading malicious rumors about illegal construction in the neighborhood, continuing their harassment and interference. I had warned the contractors in advance that these people were difficult and might cause trouble, so they were somewhat prepared. However, overwhelmed by the severity of their malicious harassment, the contractors reached their limit and threatened to call the police if the harassment and interference continued. Faced with cold stares from those looking forward to the new condominium and the mention of the police, Sophia and Georgie stopped their resistance and ceased their harassment. Demolition progressed smoothly after that, and Sophia and Georgie, having lost their house, hastily rented a small apartment nearby. However, Sophia continued not to do any housework or care for the children, and Cindy had to take on both household chores and care. Frustrations in living with Sophia accumulated, leading to daily arguments loud enough for the neighbors to hear. When Cindy could no longer bear it and sought Georgie's advice, he kept avoiding the issue, too busy with work to listen properly. Eventually, Cindy reached her limit and, one night while everyone was asleep, took the children and left Sophia and Georgie's place for good. Georgie frantically tried to contact Cindy but couldn't reach her, finding only a completed divorce application left behind. The apartment they hastily moved into was chosen in a rush, prioritizing speed without properly checking the interior or specifying detailed conditions. As a result, the living situation became difficult for Sophia, who needed care. After Cindy left, Sophia reluctantly began to do household chores but couldn't manage everything due to her injuries. Georgie also started doing household chores out of necessity, but having never done them before, the quality was terrible, leading to daily arguments with Sophia. Georgie, having been left by his wife and children and returning home tired from work, faced the stress of unfamiliar chores and caring for Sophia, appearing older than his actual age and becoming isolated at work. Originally, Georgie had an outgoing personality like Sophia's, with many friends and a fulfilling private life, but his mental state deteriorated due to his current lifestyle, leading to harsh behavior. Gradually, he lost friends and was avoided at work, becoming lonely. Moreover, Sophia has been looking for me recently, shouting my name around the house, becoming the talk of the neighborhood, as a colleague mentioned. As for me, I am now living abroad. My boss had always wanted me to go to our overseas branch, but I had declined due to caring for Sophia, who needed assistance. However, after being driven out of the house, I accepted the overseas transfer without hesitation and left for America. Life in a new environment is full of exciting new challenges. And while it requires a different perspective from America, I find it very rewarding. Before leaving America, a colleague who had long harbored feelings for me confessed, and we started dating. Though we are in a long-distance relationship, we found in each other the best partner to encourage and elevate one another. He proposed that we get married when I return to America, so I eagerly await my return, fully committed to my work. Freed from the troubling relationships of the past, I am savoring happiness and living fulfilling days.
I want to marry Thomas the doctor, so please divorce him, old woman.
One day, a young woman suddenly showed up at our house and said. Elizabeth, a bar girl who is 12 years younger than me, was leaning on my husband Thomas's arm as if seeking his affection.
Sure, but there's one condition,
I said with a smile, looking at both of them.
I'll file for divorce right in front of you. So, will you apply for your marriage certificate in front of me?
The two, momentarily confused by what was said, accepted with a smug smile. Trying not to burst into laughter, I headed to the family court with them to submit the divorce application. My name is Amelia. I'm 34 years old and work as an internist at a hospital. My husband Thomas, who is the same age, also works at the same hospital. Since we both have night shifts, our days off rarely coincide, and we don't have any children yet. While we used to get comments about grandchildren from my parents and parents-in-law, they've pretty much stopped now. Given our busy schedules and the possibility of being called into work unexpectedly, they seem to have accepted that grandchildren are off the table as long as I work at this hospital. Though I feel a bit guilty towards our parents, I find my job very fulfilling. Thomas likes his job too and occasionally attends skill upgrade training sessions. His hard work is well regarded in the hospital, and despite our busy schedules, we lead fulfilling lives. My discontent with Thomas began when the rules we set at the beginning of our marriage started to be ignored. Given our demanding jobs, we had clearly set some rules regarding household chores. One of them was that the person not on night shift would take care of the chores. Since our night shifts are irregular, it's difficult to divide the chores by day or type. Therefore, we decided to base it on the presence or absence of night shifts. Until now, if I was on a night shift, Thomas would cook simple meals and take care of cleaning and laundry. However, lately, even when he's not on night shift, Thomas is often out at night.
Hey, have you been leaving the house more often, even on nights you're not working?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been invited out for drinks a lot lately because the instructor seems to like me. I used to decline, but it felt bad to always say no, and after I accepted once, the invitations just kept coming.
Sorry. I'll try to reduce the frequency. Indeed, the hospital is hosting various training sessions at this time, some of which involve external instructors. I remembered, patting Thomas on the shoulder.
It's fine. It means you're just that wanted, right? Plus, the training sessions are only for about 2 more weeks. Don't worry about the house and just do your best.
Sorry, that helps a lot. Thomas is a good listener, which often leads me to share many things with him. It made sense why he was favored by the instructor. Though Thomas said he would use his own allowance for the drinking parties, at that rate, it would quickly run out. So, I decided to cover the expenses for the next 2 weeks from our living expenses. For the next 2 weeks, Thomas started going out at night whenever there were training sessions. Even after the training ended, the night outings continued. I thought he was busy with night shifts, but Ms. Brown, a veteran janitor, told me that wasn't the case.
Thomas hasn't been doing many night shifts lately. We'd prefer to leave it to the men, especially since we have many older staff in our department.
It turned out Thomas was going out at night even when he wasn't on night shift. Just when I was about to confront him, my schedule got so hectic that I didn't have the time to question him. By the time my schedule calmed down, I no longer felt like confronting Thomas. All I wanted was to come home and sleep in my bed. Exhausted, when I returned home after a night shift, there was an unfamiliar woman's umbrella at our house.
I'm home. Thomas, do we have a guest?
Welcome back. Sorry for the suddenness, but there's something we need to talk about.
As I walked into the living room, I saw Thomas sitting on the sofa, with an unknown woman next to him. The woman, who looked like a college student, was snuggling up to Thomas.
Can I leave my bag here?
Yeah, that's fine. But I hope you can make it quick. The atmosphere clearly indicated it wasn't a good conversation, so I sighed and went to leave my belongings in the room. Without changing, I returned to the living room in my work clothes and sat on the sofa facing Thomas and the woman.
I believe this is our first meeting. What brings you here today? Nice to meet you. I'm Elizabeth. I came here today because I want you to divorce Thomas, old woman.
More than being called old woman by someone I just met, it was her lisping speech that irked me. Holding back my confusion, I looked at Thomas, who seemed flustered for a moment but then met my gaze firmly.
Elizabeth works at the bar where I went with the instructor. She's a college student working part-time to pay for her tuition, a very earnest girl. A college student? No offense, but how old are you? Are you even over 21? I'm 22. Old woman and I have a 12-year gap. Interesting, isn't it?
I wanted to challenge her comment about being interesting but resigned myself to glaring at Thomas.
So, you cheat on me while I'm busy and now want to marry a younger girl and ask for a divorce, is that it? Why do you have to say it like it's something bad? I just want to protect Elizabeth for the rest of my life. You can live on your own, but Elizabeth needs me.
Thomas, that's so cool. Watching them engage in affectionate gestures before me made me sigh. Thomas was completely smitten by Elizabeth, finding everything she said adorable, which was incredibly annoying. Every time I called Elizabeth's name, she looked at me with a triumphant, smug smile.
Do you really want to marry this man? A man who goes to bars while married, brags, and lies. A man who takes the sales talk of bars seriously. Are you sure you won't regret it? Of course I want to marry him. After all, Thomas is a doctor and earns a lot. It's terrible to accuse him of lying. He's promised to stop going to bars once we're married. Thomas and I are in love, so it'll be fine.
Hearing this, Thomas hugged Elizabeth as if moved, and they once again retreated into their own world. I stared at Thomas in disbelief, but our eyes never met.
All right then. If you two have decided on that, I'll divorce you. But there's a condition. What's the condition? Division of assets?
At Thomas's words, I shook my head no. And then looked at them with a smile.
We're going to the family court together. I want Elizabeth to witness Thomas and I submitting our divorce application. After the divorce application is accepted, I want you two to apply for your marriage certificate in front of me.
That's all. The two, initially confused by what was said, stood up delighted when they realized that was the only condition. Then, the three of us headed to the family court. At the family court, Thomas and I first submitted our divorce application. I made a somewhat unreasonable request to the staff to expedite the process as much as possible. Later, when the divorce application was accepted, we went to the state office, where Thomas and Elizabeth applied for their marriage certificate. I helped them fill out the application forms and advised them on the necessary identification documents, all the while feeling the curious glances from those around us. The atmosphere of an ex-wife helping the new wife with the paperwork felt awkward, and the staff deliberately avoided looking at us. I felt a bit guilty, but I couldn't help feeling good about myself. Then, I returned home and moved all my belongings to my parents' house. Since I hardly ever shopped due to my demanding job and left the household items behind, there wasn't much to move except for valuables and clothes. I managed to pack everything into suitcases and moved out by car in less than a day. When I got back to my parents' house, they were furious with Thomas, but I calmed them down with a smile.
Don't worry. I'm not letting this go. I'll make sure both of them end up in a miserable situation.
3 days later, I was called to a meeting room through an internal phone line at the hospital reception.
A woman is here insisting on seeing the doctor. What should I do? Please direct her to an available room. I'll come over as soon as I finish my consultation.
When I arrived at the designated meeting room, unsurprisingly, it was Elizabeth. She was taken aback upon seeing me in my lab coat. Hello.
I've managed to spare 5 minutes between consultations, so let's make this quick, shall we? What do you mean? He wasn't a doctor, and you are, eh?
Elizabeth was panicking, but I didn't have the time to calm her down. I informed Elizabeth with a smile.
Indeed, Thomas works at this hospital, but he is a janitor. He's responsible for everything from cleaning to disinfection, a valued staff member.
What? He lied to me. Elizabeth slammed her fist on the meeting room table, ranting about Thomas. Didn't you listen? I told you, Thomas is a man who brags and lies about his status. Life might be tough from now on, but good luck.
This is a joke. If he's not a doctor, I don't need such a man.
I waved goodbye to the nearly explosive Elizabeth and left the meeting room. I heard her trying to stop me, but I rushed back to my consultation room with full speed. After exchanging high fives with the nurses who knew the situation, I calmed down and called in the next patient. Later, Elizabeth found Thomas working in the hospital and demanded a divorce. Elizabeth shouted that there was no point in being married if he wasn't a doctor, while Thomas loudly claimed that love doesn't care about professions. The spectacle was witnessed by waiting patients and nurses, quickly becoming the talk of the hospital. Despite whispers from onlookers, the heated argument between the two didn't subside until security had to intervene, nearly leading to police involvement. Elizabeth stormed out of the hospital, and Thomas followed her. Elizabeth returned home and caused a neighborhood disturbance by screaming at Thomas to divorce her and claiming the house, along with demanding compensation for being deceived. Around the time our divorce became known in the hospital, I filed for compensation against both of them for the affair. Thomas and Elizabeth came to my parents' house immediately after receiving the letter from the lawyer.
What the heck is this about demanding compensation? You didn't set any conditions other than remarrying Elizabeth. Why are you demanding compensation now?
They barged into the house without hesitation, ranting in front of my parents.
Well, Thomas, you cheated on me while we were married, and you, Elizabeth, knew he was married and still had an affair with him, right? So, of course, I'm going to demand compensation from both of you. Don't be ridiculous. It's not my fault. I won't pay a cent. You're so greedy even though you're a doctor. Your nature is so vile.
Their yelling didn't bother me at all.
Do you know why I included your remarriage in the divorce conditions?
Thomas and Elizabeth looked puzzled.
One reason is to make it clear that Thomas was having an affair while married to me. Normally, getting remarried just a few weeks after a divorce screams that the person was the affair partner. Though you didn't need to do that since you made a scene at the hospital and everyone already knows. The other reason is to ensure I could definitely get compensation from you. I thought Elizabeth was a fake name you used at the bar, and I had no idea where you worked or who you really were. So, I had you fill out the marriage certificate application and helped you with the process. Thanks to that, I got to see all your identification documents. Oh, and when you get married, you have to change your name and address on your driver's license, you know.
While Thomas frowned, Elizabeth's face turned paler.
So, I'll leave the rest to the lawyer. You can try to dodge or run, but don't forget I have all your personal information.
Elizabeth, who works in a bar, must understand the importance of protecting personal information, as it could easily lead to her being stalked. As I smiled, Elizabeth ran off with heavy footsteps. Thomas, looking dumbfounded but irritated at me, followed after Elizabeth. In the now quiet house, I sighed and soothed my angry parents. Elizabeth has been paying the compensation smoothly. Considering she's a college student, I proposed a modest amount, so she should be able to finish paying within the year. Though she wants to divorce Thomas, he's resisting, and neither of them can afford a lawyer for divorce negotiations. Thus, they're separated but not yet divorced. It was also her fault for believing Thomas was a doctor just because she saw a family name similar to his on the hospital's medical staff list. Even though she's still a college student, working in customer service means she should know better than to blur the lines between customers and employees. Perhaps for her, a wealthy doctor was an ideal marriage candidate, but having an affair with a married man was wrong. Even if Thomas agrees to a divorce in the future, she'll have a divorce record. This incident has likely taught her a lesson that destroying someone's family carelessly can lead to dire consequences for herself. As for Thomas, he disappeared from the hospital without me having to do anything. In fact, Thomas, who had left the hospital to follow Elizabeth after she was expelled that day, was in the middle of his shift. As a result, Ms. Brown, a veteran janitor and Thomas's supervisor, was furious. With her face red with anger, she wrote in large letters on Thomas's work schedule that he was absent without permission due to a romantic entanglement. Thanks to that, even the janitors who were off that day came to know about it. Among the staff, that uproar became a major incident, and the patients spread rumors among themselves. As a result, Thomas was the subject of both true and false accusations and ended up being ostracized by everyone, ignored even in greetings, which seemed to break his spirit. One day, he suddenly resigned on his own. Afterward, he apparently returned to his father-in-law house, where his father-in-law, who was already informed of the situation, scolded him severely. There was no apology from Thomas, but I decided not to worry about it anymore since the full amount of compensation I had demanded was deposited by my mother-in-law. In the hospital, I received approaches from male doctors and nurses who heard I was single again, but I declined all of them, thinking I'm okay without marriage for a while. I continue to work as an internist, busy but dedicating time to each of my patients.
What happened to you, all covered in blood?
I screamed when my 10th grade daughter, who was supposed to have gone to my husband's hometown, came home with blood streaming down her forehead. After rushing to tend to her, I immediately contacted my husband. Then, when he answered the phone, I couldn't help but yell at him.
Where are you?
I told you I'm on a business trip, didn't I?
I was dumbfounded by his unexpected reply. Because I clearly remember seeing off my husband and daughter for their trip to his hometown 5 days ago. There in front of me was my child, seriously injured. Seeing my confusion, my daughter revealed a shocking truth. My name is Camelia, a 40-year-old housewife, working part-time. My husband Bruno, also 40, is a salesman who visits various schools to sell high school textbooks. Trust is important, he says, and his neatly composed demeanor is just so cool. Our daughter Laura just entered the 10th grade this fall. She used to be so clingy to me, but now, she's so responsible that she's often cooking dinner by the time I get back from my part-time job. Bruno, Laura, and I were living a peaceful life until my mother became bedridden due to an internal illness 5 years ago. Since then, I've been busy juggling caregiving and part-time work. I haven't been able to visit my in-laws much since my mother fell ill, even missing Thanksgiving greetings. But during those times, Bruno would say, "Don't push yourself. Isn't it great to have an understanding husband?" And go back to his parents' home alone, joking and laughing. I felt terrible, but with my hands full caring for my mother, I was grateful for his understanding. However, 3 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away suddenly in an accident. My father-in-law, John, was so heartbroken, as they were very close, and Bruno's trips back home became more frequent. Moreover, Bruno would say things like,
I want to take Dad on a trip to cheer him up.
or,
I want to treat him to a delicious steak.
resulting in expenses increasing with each visit, $300, $500. But, as I had been neglecting my visits to my in-laws to care for my own mother, I couldn't really complain about the money. Then one day, as usual, Bruno mentioned the expenses for his next trip home. The next time I go back to my place, it's going to cost $1,000.
What?
I couldn't help but wonder if Bruno really needed such a large sum of money for a single trip home, but he never explained the details of the expenses. I guess it must be necessary, if I think of it as showing gratitude to John. I convinced myself with that thought. However, due to the sudden expense, I had no choice but to temporarily withdraw money from the account I had been saving for Laura's education. I'll have to cut back on trips to the beauty salon for a while and make sure not to dip into Laura's savings. From then on, I worked hard to save money and gradually replenish my daughter's account. While living these frugal days, Laura successfully completed her school applications. Just when things seemed to be settling down, I want to see my granddaughter. It's been a while, John said.
All right. Let's take Laura and Dad out for steak as a reward for always working hard. Really? Yay!
Seeing Lara's beaming smile. Thank you for always being so patient, I said, stroking her head. She had never complained, despite always having to make sacrifices and helping with my mother's care. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. Then, on the morning of the day they were to visit Bruno's parents, Laura cheerfully waved.
I'll bring back some souvenirs,
she said.
Have fun.
I replied with a smile. Everyone in the family was smiling. Little did we know then what was about to happen. It was around noon, 5 days after Bruno and Laura left for his parents' house. I was preparing lunch in the kitchen when I heard the entrance door open. Who is it, coming in without ringing the bell? Startled, I called out,
Hello!
And headed to the entrance, only to find Laura standing there with blood streaming down her forehead.
What happened?
I screamed, almost like a cry, and looked around for Bruno, but he was nowhere to be seen. Trembling, I let my trembling daughter into the house and immediately called Bruno.
Where are you?
I'm at work. I told you I went on a business trip the day after I took Laura to my parents' place.
I was utterly confused, as I hadn't heard anything about his work.
I didn't know about any trip, and more importantly, Laura has come back seriously injured.
It's probably just a fall. Girls her age tend to exaggerate. Don't take it seriously. Bye.
Bruno hastily said just that and hung up forcibly. I could never just accept. Such an absurd story from him.
Oh, really?
While tending to my daughter. Why did you get hurt? Did Dad go to work? I asked. Laura, with a pale face and trembling lips, finally murmured.
Dad pushed me.
I was shocked, but gently rubbed her back and listened to her story. Then, an unbelievable truth came to light. Bruno had been keeping secrets from us, and he had inflicted a serious injury on Laura after she discovered them. And that wasn't all. He had threatened Laura.
If you tell anyone about this, next time it won't just be an injury,
he said. John returned from an outing just as Bruno hesitated, allowing Laura to escape from her in-laws' house. Fortunately, Laura had some money with her, enabling her to take the bus alone. But I can only imagine how anxious she must have been, hiding her injuries and making her way back here. I will never forgive anyone who hurts my sweet daughter. I swore revenge, not only for Bruno raising his hand against our daughter but also for the secrets he kept from us. After hearing about Bruno's misdeeds, I reached for my mobile phone to call John. And was surprised to see a mountain of missed calls from him. Oh, John, I'm sorry. I was cooking and didn't notice the phone.
No, it's fine. More importantly, Laura had to rush back home for some urgent matter. I was worried if she made it back safely, that's why I called so many times.
Hearing John's words, I was speechless. Bruno had concocted such a lie to cover up the fact that his injured daughter had fled back home. I then spilled everything to John, who was unaware of the situation, about what I learned from Laura.
Laura will be okay. I'm taking her to the hospital.
But I can't forgive Bruno. Could you please keep him at your house for a while so I can deal with him?
John replied.
Of course.
And promised to help. He agreed to cunningly persuade Bruno to stay at his parents' house for a while. In the meantime, I ran around making various preparations for confronting Bruno. 5 days later. After finishing the investigation into Bruno's secrets, I was heading to his parents' house. Just as I was about to ring the entrance doorbell, I saw Laura running towards me, out of breath.
Mom. Wait.
I told you to stay at home.
I can't just sit there. He needs to take responsibility for my injury.
I had planned to confront Bruno alone at his parents' house, not wanting Laura to witness a conflict between her parents. However, Laura clearly had no intention of staying quiet.
I think I have a right to speak up too.
She was adamant. Reluctantly, I accepted Laura's anger and decided to face the situation together. We were greeted by John, who already knew our plan, and upon entering the living room, we saw Bruno, seemingly just woken up, lounging in his pajamas and watching TV, despite it being midday.
Oh, I thought you were on a business trip.
Surprised by my sudden voice, Bruno sprang up.
Well, I was supposed to go, but then it got cancelled unexpectedly.
Bruno began to stammer out a lame excuse.
But never mind that.
what about Lara's injury? I want to hear about it.
Oh, the clumsy girl. She apparently fell down the stairs and hit her forehead. I almost yelled at Bruno for his blatant evasion, but John beat me to it.
Enough. I know that Lara's injury is your fault.
Lara added.
Yes. That's right.
And I glared at Bruno. Realizing he was in a tough spot, Bruno suddenly looked smug and retorted.
You never showed your face at my parents' place, and now you act all high and mighty. I've been the one doing the filial duties for both of us.
Bruno sneered, thinking I had no comeback. Indeed, until now. I had thought he was right and had kept quiet. But after hearing Lara's story, I knew all too well that Bruno's words were full of lies.
Oh really? Is leaving your father alone at home and making Lara do all the housework your idea of filial piety? That's right! Since you brought me here, you've just been relaxing at home. Shut up. This was just a one-time thing. Usually, it's me who does all the hard work.
As Bruno arrogantly boasted, I took out John's household ledger, which I had been given beforehand. It detailed not only the financial transactions, but also how Bruno spent his time at his parents' house. Let me read some of it to you. June 10th, gave Bruno $200 for transportation. He lounged around all day and went out at night as usual, returning in the morning. Food expenses increased due to Bruno's stay. I calmly read out the entries. According to the ledger, every time Bruno visited.
My wife won't even give me money for the trip.
He lied, claiming that he receives money from John. Taking advantage of my absence, Bruno portrayed me as a stingy and scary wife to gain sympathy from his father.
A grown man, still leeching off his parents, aren't you ashamed? And they even take care of various things for you. You always come over and I feel bad, thinking you're not getting any pocket money from your wife, so I try to help out. But it was all lies, wasn't it?
Bruno, cornered by our accusations, fell silent and didn't respond.
Swindling money from your father, what exactly did you use it for?
Well,
no need to say anything. You're probably just thinking up more lies.
Ignoring Bruno's muttering, I thrust a certain photograph in front of him.
You wanted money so badly because you were splurging at places like this. How do you know about this place?
The photo showed Bruno entering a dubious nightclub. Bruno's face drained of color, clearly not expecting me to know this much. Indeed, the secret Lara had discovered during the visit was about this very matter. Lara had thought Bruno was diligently taking care of John, but when she noticed his repeated late-night returns, she became suspicious and started her own investigation. She secretly installed a location tracking app on Bruno's mobile phone and, after he left, used her computer to check his whereabouts, always showing the same place. When Lara researched it on the internet, she discovered it was a night spot catering to men. While she was about to call and inform me, Bruno returned home. He became furious upon finding Lara checking his location and the club on her computer and pushed her, causing her to hit her head on the edge of a shelf and bleed. You know the rest. After hearing Lara's story, I left my mother in professional care for a few days and staked out the club to gather evidence of Bruno's escapades, capturing photos of him entering the establishment. When I saw Bruno enter the club so lightheartedly, the shock I felt was indescribable. And to think, the money for this recent trip home, though temporarily, was taken from Lara's college fund.
Dad, you're the worst!
Feeling awkward with the undeniable evidence of the photos, Bruno muttered, "Isn't this normal for men?" And looked up at John, seeking agreement.
What are you talking about? Dipping into your child's college fund for nightlife is despicable. I'm tired from work. A little fun should be okay.
Lara sighed in disbelief at Bruno's brazenness. "Mom, do you know what kind of place that is?" "Eh? No, I just took the photos and left immediately." "I thought so. Here, take a look," Lara said and spread out several printouts of the club's website on the table. John and I leaned over to see the girls in the club dressed in school uniforms. All appeared to be adults, but it was clear the establishment specialized in this kind of cosplay service. Oh. To expose our daughter to such a world. I was filled with remorse, but Lara seemed unfazed.
So Dad likes this kind of stuff.
Gross. She shuddered as if chilled while thrusting the papers at Bruno.
You don't have to go that far. Having a fetish for uniforms could be a big problem if your school clients find out, right? I doubt your company, which sells educational materials to schools, would continue employing someone with such hobbies.
As I gave him a cold gaze, Bruno turned pale.
Oh, right.
I quickly pulled out Bruno's schedule book, which I had found left in his business bag.
Looking at this, I now know all the schools you've been visiting. Maybe I should contact these clients about your wonderful hobby.
Please, not that. I'm sorry. I went too far. I'll change, I promise.
Bruno must have realized there was no escaping the situation. He started to tremble and collapsed onto the floor. Despite his apologies, years of his club visits and extravagance, culminating in injuring Lara, were unforgivable.
Who's going to believe the words of a liar like you?
I've already consulted a lawyer and am ready for divorce. You'll pay back every penny you squandered, plus compensation. This is the end for us.
No, please.
Bruno tried to cling to Lara, but she recoiled.
Yuck. Get away from me.
And eventually, wah. He broke down crying. We watched his pathetic state with cold indifference. Shortly after, the divorce was finalized, and Bruno was ordered to pay back the $15,000 he had squandered plus $30,000 in damages. Somehow, his club visits were leaked, resulting in his termination from his job. John cut ties with him, and now Bruno lives alone in an old apartment, barely getting by with day jobs. Unable to pay the damages, he had to borrow money from dubious lenders and now lives in fear of debt collectors. Meanwhile, after the divorce, I had more time to myself. With Lara's help, my mother's health improved significantly, and she no longer needed constant care. Now, the three of us women live together, enjoying a happy and harmonious life.
I washed your baby in the washing machine.
My assailant burst into laughter the moment she saw my face. She had always disliked me, so she must have been waiting for this opportunity. But I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in response.
My daughter is sleeping right next to me.
My assailant Janice looked utterly shocked at first, then turned pale as she watched our daughter Kyrie sleeping soundly. This story is about a major family incident involving all our relatives, which happened one Christmas. My name is Patrice, a 35-year-old homemaker. I married Bryant, who is 5 years younger, and after about 7 years, we were finally blessed with a child when I turned 35. Our daughter Kyrie, now 8 months old, is a lively baby who loves her milk and sleeps well. As an older mother, I was relieved, but there were still challenges to face. One of them was my assailant, Janice, who is 10 years younger than me. She disliked me for marrying her brother and constantly harassed me whenever she got the chance. Janice's attachment and love for her brother Bryant were intense, something you might call a brother complex. I don't have siblings, so I can't fully understand, but I find it bizarre that at 25, she still wants to shower with her biological brother. Bryant always brushed it off as a joke, but I couldn't make sense of it. She looked down on me for being an older wife and for having a child late in life. When Bryant wasn't around, she would invariably taunt me, saying,
"How did an old lady like you manage to trick my brother?"
"I'm just curious, for future reference." "Janice, I don't think that's an appropriate way to speak, but..."
Shut up. You're getting too cocky just because you're acting submissive. It's disgusting that an old lady like you stole my brother and then got pregnant.
Could you please keep it down? The baby might wake up.
I held back a sigh and deliberately spoke to Janice in polite, respectful language. After all, she was constantly at our house, clinging to Bryant and trying to follow him every time he left his seat, which also troubled him. Moreover, she would ring the doorbell early in the morning and not leave until late at night. Eventually, she started acting childishly, saying,
"I'm going to stay over at my brother's place."
Bryant had his hands full just trying to send her home.
Good grief, Janice is such a handful. Honey, I have something I want to ask you about her.
I cautiously asked Bryant if he was aware of Janice's terrible behavior. His response was,
I had no idea, this is news to me.
Bryant was surprised by what I told him. It all made sense now. Janice had been pretending to be nice in front of her brother and waited for him to leave to insult me. Remembering how Janice used to cling to Bryant, acting as if she were his real girlfriend, made me feel sick to my stomach. Bryant found it hard to believe, but I told him the facts as they were. Even after that, Janice continued her usual behavior.
Let's go take a shower together, big brother.
Trying to drag him into the bathroom. But after hearing my story, Bryant began to reject her advances.
Look, Janice, we're adults now. Taking a shower together isn't appropriate.
I know it's weird. Janice didn't miss my muttered comment. Right after watching Bryant head for the shower, she turned to me and suddenly punched me in the stomach.
Oof!
I couldn't contain the pain and crouched down on the floor.
It's your fault. You must have put some ideas into my brother's head.
Then she relentlessly kicked my back as I was clutching my stomach.
Get lost already!
As the time approached for Bryant to usually come out of the shower, Janice forcibly made me stand up and pushed me onto the sofa.
Listen, if you tell my brother about this, I'll make you suffer even more.
Groaning in pain, I was completely overwhelmed by Janice's violent behavior. What's worse, her anger, initially directed at me, gradually shifted to someone else. It happened one day when Bryant was about to take Kyrie into the shower.
I'll help you, big brother. Maybe I'll take a shower too.
Janice was fully intent on joining them, heading towards the bathroom. Knowing I had to stop this, I opened my mouth, but Bryant looked fed up.
Janice, I've told you before, I'm not showering with you. I have a wife and a daughter, so it's time for you to move on from me.
No. Why are you being so mean?
Ignoring her tantrum, Bryant quickly picked up Kyrie and headed for the shower. This scene repeated several times, with Janice being rejected by him each time, gradually shifting her anger from me to Kyrie. She couldn't stand the thought of the baby showering with Bryant, her brother, while she was rejected. That's probably what she felt. Soon, Janice would cause a terrible incident. One Christmas, our family was invited to my in-laws, where we gathered with relatives. Naturally, Janice was there too, and I had a bad feeling about it. However, in front of the relatives, Janice's true colors were never revealed, and surprisingly, she was quite well behaved. Despite her usual disdain for me, she approached me with a smile and acted friendly.
But honestly, it's kind of creepy. There's no way she would suddenly be nice to me.
I decided to avoid Janice as much as possible and went to where the children of our relatives were gathered. There, over 10 children and babies were huddled together, holding on to their allowances and toys given by the relatives. I approached a relative, Opal, who was there. Opal, thanks again for the baby clothes. How about we take a picture of our 2 kids? She had given me matching baby clothes for my daughter and hers as a birth gift, so I had dressed Kyrie in them for the visit. We both had a great time taking photos of the children with our mobile phones. Eventually, the kids decided to play in the snow-covered garden. They were quickly covered in snow. And even a nearby baby got splashed with it. That's when Janice was asked by a relative to help wash the children in the shower. She grimaced for a moment but then, surprisingly,
All right. Come on, everyone, follow me.
She picked up a baby with a smile and led the children away. However, with over 10 kids, they formed a long line following Janice.
Oh no, Kyrie got left behind.
Janice seemed not to notice, and Kyrie was sitting there with snow on her clothes. I was about to take Kyrie to the shower, but she started crying, probably wanting milk. Oh, there. Maybe I should give her milk first. I wanted to wash the gifted baby clothes right away, but after feeding her, Kyrie fell asleep, making it difficult to undress her. Reluctantly, I let it go, laid Kyrie beside me, and enjoyed chatting with the relatives. Then, Janice appeared with a triumphant look on her face.
Ahaha! I washed your baby in the washing machine. That'll show you.
Excuse me. I couldn't understand what she was talking about. What did she mean by washing a child in a washing machine?
Kyrie is sleeping right next to me.
What? Janice looked confused as well, seeing Kyrie sleeping soundly. We were both unclear about what was happening. Suddenly, a scream came from the bathroom. Janice and I rushed there, and we found Opal in a complete panic.
Opal, calm down. What happened?
Opal claimed that when she opened the washing machine, she found a baby inside. And that baby was her daughter. Her voice, crying and holding her child, attracted more and more relatives. Seizing the moment, Janice pointed at me.
Patrice! How could you?
What are you talking about?
As soon as Janice shouted, all eyes turned to me, and I was taken aback. Then, the relatives started to confront me.
Patrice, we need to hear your side of the story.
Taking advantage of this distraction, I saw Janice sneaking out of the house.
Wait! Janice!
In this desperate moment, Bryant's sharp voice rang out.
This is not the time for accusations. We need to get to the hospital right away.
Bryant immediately called the paramedics, and Opal and her husband, with the baby, boarded the ambulance and headed to the hospital. Left at the in-laws' house, surrounded by relatives, I seethed with anger at Janice for trying to pin this on me even in such a situation. I'll make sure she pays for this. She better be ready. I decided to explain all of Janice's misdeeds to the relatives and asked for their cooperation in punishing her. After returning from the hospital, Opal and her husband, furious after hearing everything, agreed to participate in the plan. I asked Bryant to lure Janice back to the in-laws' house with a phone call.
Janice, Patrice admitted her guilt. I can't believe she would do something so horrible.
Eh? Oh, really?
So, I want to hear more about it. You ran away because you feared Patrice's grudge, right? I'll protect you, so please come back and help us uncover the truth.
Comforted by her brother's kind words, Janice naively returned to the in-laws' house. However, the house was in a state of mourning. Opal, in tears, "My daughter has passed away," she announced to the remaining relatives. While everyone was engulfed in sorrow, Janice was the only one looking smug. It's all Patrice's fault. What are you going to do about this? How will you make amends? Joining in Janice's sneering attitude. How could you do something like this, Patrice?
What grudge did you have against Opal?
The other relatives started accusing me. I'm so sorry. I had to.
Janice was after Bryant, so I thought of framing her for the incident with the children in the shower.
As I began to break down in tears, Janice started to panic. What? Me, after my brother? How could you make up such a lie? Is there any proof? So, I said, actually, and showed Janice and the relatives the screen of my mobile phone. It was a recording of our home's laundry room, focusing on the washing machine. Janice could be seen taking Brian's underwear from the laundry, sniffing it, and then hiding it in her pocket. She had been stealing her own brother's underwear every time she visited our house.
Janice, what are you doing? I thought it was strange that I've been losing underwear recently.
Wait! This recording has nothing to do with what happened. I was forced by Patrice to put the child in the washing machine against my will.
Oh, so you admit to doing it yourself?
But you forced me to.
I immediately played another recording from my phone. It was Janice's voice saying,
I washed your baby in the laundry.
Her face turned pale as she listened.
Janice kept coming to our house every day, hitting and kicking me, so I've been collecting evidence all along.
I had suspected something fishy about Janice's unusually cheerful demeanor that day, so I kept the recording function on my mobile phone active. Janice fell to her knees and after a moment, looked up and clung to me.
Please, don't tell the police. I don't want to get arrested for this.
That's too easy for you. You put an innocent child through this. And you almost did a terrible thing by mistaking my daughter for Opal's child and putting her in the washing machine.
What do you mean? Opal's daughter is dead, isn't she? The story about the baby dying after being put in the washing machine was a lie to deceive Janice. Opal had set up the washing machine and left for a moment. Janice then put the baby inside and closed the lid. But she didn't know how to use the washing machine and left, thinking it had started. Opal returned, switched it on, and then realized there was a child inside. There was no danger to the baby's life, but Opal was still furious at Janice.
Even my relatives accusing me was all an act to catch you off guard. You're no longer welcome in this family.
But how can this be?
Janice collapsed to the floor. Afterward, Janice was arrested by the police called by the relatives. She was rejected by her beloved brother.
Never contact me again.
And cut off by all the relatives. Even if she gets out of jail, there's no one left to help her. Meanwhile, Opal's child who was put in the washing machine has fully recovered. My daughter is growing up healthy, playing with the other children like sisters, as Bryant and I watch them fondly every day.
Look, that's my friend's dad.
This happened when I attended my beloved niece Gloria's parents' day. I was shocked to see a couple walking into the classroom. Because the man, cozying up to a woman I didn't recognize, was my own husband, Mike. After talking to Gloria, everything clicked for me. So, that's what it was all about. I'll never forgive this. As Mike was about to leave the classroom, I blocked his way, putting on a smile. Let's continue to get along as families, shall we? Please, stay with us until the end to see the turmoil that unfolds from here. My name is Emily, I'm 33 years old, and we're a dual-income couple in our 5th year of marriage. My husband's name is Mike. We met in a sort of half-set-up situation. My parents, who I met later in life, became good friends with Mike's parents, and we first met at a family dinner we were all invited to. Mike made the first move, and that's how our dating began. After a year and a half of dating, when we decided to marry, both sets of parents were thrilled. Everyone around us congratulated us, saying we were a perfect match. At that time, my close sister Flora also attended from afar, bringing along her then 1-year-old daughter Gloria, and I remember feeling so happy. 5 years later, I was still living with Mike, busy with work. Mike would say he's busy with work, coming home late on weekdays, and increasingly, his precious weekends were spent working. With Mike off and away, I found myself spending more time alone. I wish we had kids. That thought crossed my mind, and I shook it off. Actually, not long after we got married, Mike dropped a bombshell on me. I, actually, can't have children. The hospital test results he showed me clearly stated that. Since when did you know? I knew before we got married. But I thought if I told you, you might not marry me. Please, Emily, I don't want our parents to know about this. Keep it a secret. Mike had always said he loved kids and wanted a daughter someday. Knowing that, I felt deeply sorry for him at that moment. We'll take care of each other instead of having kids. Let's live our lives together. With those words from Mike, I nodded and resigned myself to giving up on the idea of having children. Now, 5 years later, did Mike keep his word? No, he didn't. Saying he's busy and tired, leaving all the household chores to me despite being a dual-income couple, without ever showing appreciation, his attitude towards me turned increasingly cold. One day, I got a call from Flora. She had moved abroad with her husband right after our wedding, but now that his assignment was over, they were moving back, not too far from us. Gloria was now 6 years old. I had seen her in photos, but but this would be our first real interaction since the wedding. I was looking forward to meeting Flora and Gloria again. That night, I tried to tell Mike, who came home late, about Flora's return.
Welcome back, Mike. You know, I got a call from Flora today. I'm tired. I don't have time for small talk.
Mike looked down at me coldly and quickly went to the bathroom. Left alone, I stood there, feeling lonely. Despite his aloof attitude towards me, Mike left all the troublesome matters for me to handle.
Hey! We're going to have a birthday party for Mom. Dad asked me to prepare, so you take care of it.
I was left puzzled when he unilaterally said that, but I went ahead and prepared for my mother-in-law, Helen's birthday party, squeezing it into my busy schedule. On the day of the birthday party, Mike, who attended, wore a proud smile as he saw Helen's joy.
This birthday party, I set it all up. All for my dear Mom. Dad, I did good, right?
Despite the fact that he had dumped everything on me, Mike had the audacity to claim the credit, which irked me a bit. However, after the birthday party was over, my father-in-law Nicholas and Helen thanked me.
We know it was Emily who prepared everything. Thanks for doing this for Helen. Please continue to take good care of Mike.
They were as kind to me as they had been since the day we got married. Despite my growing grievances with Mike, I was grateful for having met Nicholas and Helen. Sometime later, Mike's arrogant behavior only escalated. He wouldn't have a proper conversation with me, yet he always found something to complain about regarding the housework. One morning, an incident occurred.
Hey, Emily! What were you thinking?
Mike yelled at me, his face contorted with anger as I was getting ready to leave for work.
What's wrong with you all of a sudden?
You didn't polish my shoes. How am I supposed to go to work like this?
Indeed, Mike had come home after I had gone to bed the previous night, so I hadn't polished his shoes. But, fed up with the mounting stress, I retorted.
They're your shoes. Why don't you take care of them yourself? Stop expecting me to do everything.
In the next moment, I felt a sharp pain on my cheek. It took a second to realize Mike had slapped me.
Mike, did you just hit me? Shut up. There's nothing wrong with disciplining my wife. If you don't want this to happen, do your job as a wife properly.
With that, Mike stormed out of the house. I was left clutching my cheek, collapsing onto the floor.
He's hardly home, acts cold, and now violence. This is too much.
That's when I began to question the meaning of my marriage to Mike. Yet, considering how happy our parents were when we married, and how kind Nicholas and Helen have been to me, I couldn't easily decide to divorce. One day, not long after she had returned from abroad, Flora asked,
"Would you come to my daughter's Parents' Day?"
Only 2 family members could attend, and Flora's husband couldn't make it because of work. I happily agreed, saying,
"I'll be there."
On the day of the Parents' Day, I went with Flora to Gloria's classroom. We waved back at Gloria, who was happily waving at us. Soon, the lesson started, and I watched from the back corner of the classroom. Then, a couple entered the classroom late. I was shocked when I glanced at them, because the dad was unmistakably Mike. He was there with a blonde woman, dressed flamboyantly, whispering and looking cozy as they started watching the class. I told Flora, and both of us, surprised, tried to stay out of sight from Mike for the time being. At that moment, I discreetly sent a message to someone. As the Parents' Day came to a close, the children started making their way over to their parents. Gloria ran over to Flora, and I bent down to ask her,
"Do you know that man over there?"
That's Irene's dad. I saw his picture at their house when we went over to play.
Gloria had been abroad for so long that she didn't remember Mike's face since the wedding when she was 1. At that moment, I understood everything.
So that's what it was. I will never forgive this.
As Mike, the woman, and a child named Irene were about to leave the classroom, I blocked their path, forcing a smile in front of the child.
Hello. I hear Gloria has been getting along well with you. Thank you for that.
Mike looked at me, his face freezing over. The woman casually replied. Hello.
Since the kids get along so well, let's all continue to be friendly, shall we? Family style.
Huh. Beside the puzzled woman, Mike started to tremble. Then Flora said, Since the two want to play together, we'll take Irene with us. And quickly whispered something to me as she was leaving. As Flora and the children walked away, it left me, Mike, and the woman.
Come on, Mike, let's go.
Johanna said.
Yes, excuse us.
Mike responded, trying to act like a stranger. I grabbed Mike's arm with a smile, still.
Huh? What are you doing with my husband? And who are you?
I then introduced myself with a serious face. Sorry for the late introduction. I'm Emily.
His wife, you know?
The woman's face turned pale as she realized the situation. They tried to dash away. But having been in track and field during my school days, I easily caught up and stopped them. At the school gate, Mike gasped.
What? Dad, Mom too.
Yes, the person I emailed during Parents' Day was Nicholas. I had sent him a message asking him to come quickly to Gloria's school. Seeing Nicholas and Helen, Mike gave up trying to escape and collapsed. Nicholas, Helen, and I put Mike and the woman in the car and headed to the in-laws' house. In the living room of the in-laws' house, with the two seated side by side, I confronted them.
So, why were you at Parents' Day?
It was nothing. She's just an acquaintance. A single mother who asked me to act as a father figure, nothing more.
But Gloria mentioned there are family photos of you at her house. Do you usually take family photos with just acquaintances?
You don't need to lie so blatantly. Mike, resigning himself, began to explain. The woman's name was Johanna. He had been involved with her before we met. Johanna worked at a night bar, and thinking Nicholas and Helen wouldn't approve, he kept it hidden. After introducing me to his parents, he broke off the relationship with Johanna. But right after we got engaged, Johanna contacted him saying,
I gave birth to your child.
After seeing Irene, I couldn't help but go back to Johanna. I found her so adorable. That's when I asked something that had been bothering me.
You can't have children, right? That medical report was real, wasn't it?
That's because...
Mike began to reveal something shocking. Right before our marriage, Johanna had told him,
Don't have children with anyone but this child.
And so, Mike had gone through with a vasectomy.
For such a selfish reason, you made me give up on having children. Do you understand how I felt?
Johanna laughed at my angry reproach. Shut up, loser. Mike loves me.
You are just a pity marriage.
When I asked,
Is that true, Mike?
He nodded. I married Mike because Nicholas and Helen liked me, and our parents got along well. I was efficient, took care of the house and personal matters perfectly. So he only ever saw me as a maid.
So, a maid, huh? But now that it's out, there's no helping it.
I'll divorce you.
I have a woman I love and a lovely daughter.
You're no longer needed. That's when Nicholas, who had been silent until now, spoke up.
Did you forget why Emily's parents and we got along so well?
Huh?
The truth was, both our parents owned businesses and were in a cooperative relationship. Currently, Nicholas's company's most important client was the company where I now serve as a department head, owned by my parents.
You might not know since you were sent to work at a friend's company for training, but if we lose the business with Emily's company, we won't survive.
It was then revealed that Nicholas had always told Mike,
You'll take over someday, so keep up with the company's affairs.
But Mike, not taking it seriously, was unaware that my parents' company was the most crucial client.
So, I intended to leave the company to you, but now there may not be a company to inherit. More importantly, we're disowning you. I never want to see the face of such a foolish son again.
As Nicholas declared disownment, Mike started to panic, begging Nicholas and Helen. But Nicholas and Helen firmly refused him. At that moment, I received an email on my mobile phone. Checking it, I smirked.
So, Johanna, how's Irene's real dad doing?
Huh?
I confronted them with a photo of Johanna, heavily pregnant and looking cozy in a childbirth class with a brown-haired man unknown to me.
You seemed quite close to this man during your pregnancy. Where did he go?
How do you have that?
I explained that when Flora took the children away, I had asked her to gather any information she could on this woman. Flora, using her network of mom friends, managed to get this photo. According to her mom friend,
this man used to accompany her to every prenatal checkup. I thought he was the new husband Mike knew about.
Hearing this, Johanna's face grew paler and paler. Mike was visibly shaken by the photo. No wonder, since the man in the picture and Irene looked remarkably alike.
Hey, Johanna! What's going on? This man looks exactly like Irene.
When I pressed her to tell the truth, Johanna seemed to resign herself and began to speak. She admitted to two-timing while with Mike, and said that she got pregnant right after they broke up, but after the child was born, they had a big fight, and he left. She thought it would be best to claim the child was Mike's, the prospective company president's, to monopolize Nicholas's inheritance, so she convinced Mike to have a vasectomy.
You're kidding! I believed in you and became incapable of having kids.
Mike shook Johanna's shoulders in disbelief, but she just turned pale and said nothing. Then Mike approached me.
I'm sorry, Emily. I was deceived by this woman. You said you'd stay with me even if we couldn't have kids. Let's start over. I only love you.
Huh? Didn't you just say I was no longer needed? Who's the maid?
Mike was at a loss for words, so I declared,
we're getting a divorce. And I'll be suing both of you for adultery, so be prepared.
As Mike broke down crying, I told him,
never show your face to me again.
I left Mike and Johanna to their ugly argument and walked away. Eventually, my divorce from Mike was finalized. I received $40,000 in alimony from Mike and $20,000 from Johanna. Nicholas and Helen, having disowned Mike and deeply apologized, persuaded my parents to continue the business dealings. They informed the president of the company Mike was supposed to inherit that they were leaving Mike's fate in their hands. Consequently, Mike, who had never been serious at work, was fired. Johanna moved away with her child and returned to night work, likely struggling with debts incurred from paying me alimony. After separating from Johanna and depleting his savings, jobless Mike lived alone in a showerless apartment, desperately job hunting. As for me, 3 years after leaving Mike, I remarried a sincere man I met through work, who treats me kindly, and we were blessed with the child I had always wished for. We're now looking forward to meeting our baby, enjoying each day happily.
Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital?
In the middle of the night, 8-year-old Owen came to our house. Moreover, he was limping in pain. It's over an hour's walk for an adult to our place. What on earth happened? Looking closer, various parts of his body were scraped, and he was bleeding. Exhausted and in pain, Owen's eyes were vacant, as if he might collapse at any moment.
Absolutely not!
My husband shouted at the innocent child. He was very angry and went somewhere. And then, I was shaken to my core by my husband's unexpected action. I am Kate, 60 years old. I lived with my husband, Raymond. Our son and his wife lived in the next town, about an hour's walk from our house, making a car essential for travel. Phil's wife, Linda, is 6 years younger than him, and they have an 8-year-old grandson, Owen. Until now, Phil often brought Owen to our house, so I had been taking care of Owen since he was a baby. On the other hand, Linda rarely came over and had told Phil, "Bring him here." However, it seems Linda has been devoted to housework and childcare, wanting to make some free time for her from now on. Moreover, Phil said, Linda is very domestic and takes good care of us, satisfied with their current family situation.
There's no way to intervene, even as a mom.
I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected. I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected.
Owen has just started elementary school and has friends. It's cruel to make him transfer.
Of course, Phil tried to persuade her. But Linda insisted, and with a heavy heart, he left for abroad alone. And sadly, at the same time, Owen stopped coming to our house. I have repeatedly asked Linda to let Owen visit, but each time she made up excuses to refuse. Still not giving up, I pleaded over the phone just to see him for a moment. Then Linda, raising her voice, ranted at me.
It's hard enough without Phil. I can't stand having to worry about you too. Are you trying to monitor me?
No, that's not it at all. Just a short time at the doorstep, I just want to see Owen's face.
Don't you understand I don't want that? If you keep pestering me, I'll tell Phil and have him scold you.
After saying that, Linda abruptly hung up. Sigh, it seems like nothing will help. Maybe that's just how a son's wife is. Phil had emailed me that his new job was demanding, cutting into his sleep time. Not wanting to cause Phil any more worry, I decided to wait to see Owen until Phil returned home. And before I knew it, more than half a year had passed since I last saw Owen. Raymond and I, missing seeing Owen's face, looked at his photos every day to distract ourselves. Raymond's favorite was a group photo from Owen's entrance ceremony. According to Raymond, Owen's anxious face was adorable. One evening, just as the clock struck 9 p.m., the sound of the house doorbell rang suddenly, so I opened the front door. Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital? What a surprise, 8-year-old Owen had come.
What happened to you?
My leg hurts, and I can't sleep at night, so I decided to go to the hospital myself. But this is all I have.
When Owen slowly opened his palm, there were 3 dimes. Apparently, he had walked here, dragging his leg in pain, for over an hour.
I fell on the way,
said Owen, whose knees were scraped and bleeding. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't understand. I decided to slowly listen to his story and invited Owen into the house for now. Then, at that moment, Raymond, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke up.
Absolutely not. What are you saying? Are you out of your mind? Owen is in so much trouble.
Angry at Raymond's cold attitude, I grabbed his sweater with both hands and shook him. However, Raymond pulled my hands away with great force and, with a face like a demon, left the house without saying anything.
It's because I came. I'm sorry. I'll go home now.
Owen, completely shrunken, turned his back on me and reached for the doorknob. Owen, don't worry about Grandpa. I'll take you to the hospital myself, so no need to worry. I immediately called an ambulance and at the same time, I called Linda. But I couldn't get through to her, and my texts weren't even read. 20 minutes later, while all this was happening, the paramedics finally arrived. Owen was taken to a nearby hospital, and I accompanied him. Afterwards, Owen was diagnosed with a fracture by the doctor. He was treated and instructed to rest at home.
What is Linda doing at a time like this?
Even at this point, I couldn't get in touch with Linda, so I decided to take Owen back to our house. Would you like something warm to drink? You used to like tea with honey, didn't you? I'll prepare it now, so please sit in that chair and wait. As soon as we arrived home, I filled the kettle with water and turned on the stove. Then, Owen suddenly came close to me. Oh dear, you should be sitting still.
It's not that, Grandma. You see.
At this moment, I was told an astonishing truth by Owen. Owen, having confessed everything, had big tears in his eyes. So that's what happened. It must have been hard for you. But you can rest easy now. I hugged him gently, as if wrapping him in warmth. And then, I was informed of a certain event by an unexpected person.
Those who made Owen go through this will not get away with it.
A flame of revenge ignited within me. The next day at noon. Finally, Linda answered the phone. Owen has fractured his leg and was seen at the hospital. Now, he's at our place. Apparently, resting at home and eating nutritious food will help him heal faster.
Then, Kate, please continue to take care of Owen for a while. You must be happy to be able to look after Owen so much since you haven't been able to see him until now, right?
I just said,
"Understood,"
and hung up. I had no intention of sending Owen back to that house. Even if Linda had said, "I'm coming to pick up the child now," I planned to keep Owen with me by any means, so Linda's response was exactly what I wanted. However, I felt anger at her attitude as a mother. But I didn't want to get unnecessarily confrontational and spoil the plan. In the meantime, as I supported Owen, I ran around preparing for retaliation, and finally, everything was ready. "All right, watch out. Today, right here, I'll bring you down." A week after Owen came to stay with us, I left him at home to look after himself for a bit while I, accompanied by someone, made a surprise visit to Linda's place.
What is this about? Showing up out of the blue. Please, just go home.
I had gotten a key to their house from Owen. Ignoring Linda's protests, I began to look around the room.
Was someone here just before we arrived?
I noticed that, although the room was generally tidy, the sheets on the bed in the bedroom were unusually disheveled.
Enough of this. I'll call the police if I have to.
Oh, Linda, you really think you're in any position to say that? I've heard everything from Owen. Leaving him all alone while you're out at night, I see.
He was told not to tell anyone. What Owen had tearfully told me before was about this very issue. According to him, one day, feeling lonely and scared because he was sick, he tried to stop Linda from going out at night by standing in the doorway with his arms outstretched.
But you just pushed him aside and left anyway. He hurt his ankle when he fell.
Linda always told Owen,
"Don't you dare tell Dad or anyone about what happens at home, or you'll go without food."
But that day, unable to bear the pain any longer, Owen thought,
maybe Grandpa and Grandma can help somehow.
So, relying on his memory, he limped all the way to our house.
If you have money for luxury brands, you should at least take Owen to the hospital.
When I opened the closet, it was packed with obviously expensive bags and clothes. Owen had confided in me.
Mom always has nice clothes and bags, but she doesn't care about me.
It was clear Linda's possessions were all high-end and flashy.
The loneliness without Phil, you're trying to fill it with shopping. That's also on your son, you know.
Linda, veins throbbing with anger, pointed her finger at me. Then, suddenly, a low voice boomed from behind me.
"Shut up! I've seen the affair with my own eyes."
The voice belonged unmistakably to Raymond. He had stormed Linda's home with me. That day Owen came to us seeking help.
"Not lending it!"
Raymond had shouted before storming off, leaving me initially infuriated. However, his anger was actually directed at Linda. Overwhelmed by fury, he had blurted out without thinking. Raymond had headed straight for Linda's house after leaving ours.
"I saw you getting into a car driven by a man at that very moment. And I knew he was Owen's first-grade teacher."
Raymond had memorized the face of the teacher who had been in charge of Owen's class from looking at the school photo every day. After Owen revealed the truth to us, we were informed about Linda's secret rendezvous with Owen's former teacher.
I heard from the affair partner that you always dressed provocatively for parent-teacher meetings and aggressively flirted with him.
I confronted the former teacher based on Raymond's testimony. The affair partner admitted that despite knowing it was wrong, he gave in to Linda's temptations when Owen moved to a different class. The former teacher expressed remorse and readily agreed to pay the compensation. He had already submitted his resignation and promised never to see Linda again, planning to return to his hometown.
You stayed in Japan because you couldn't bear to part with him under the guise of for the child's sake, didn't you?
Well, that's...
Linda faltered, caught off guard. I assumed that she hadn't taken Owen to the hospital after pushing him because she feared being discovered. And perhaps she thought Phil would cut her allowance if he found out, which is why she didn't take Owen to the hospital. Then, likely because I had accurately pinpointed the truth. Linda couldn't hide her agitation. However, after a brief pause, she defiantly claimed,
"If I beg Phil, he'll surely forgive me."
"Haha, he really loves me."
Linda, enough is enough. Phil, when did you get back?
Phil, having been informed by me, had hurried back to verify the truth with his own eyes. Believing Linda wouldn't show her true self in his presence, he secretly observed everything from the shadows.
I've heard it all. I can't forgive you. Your behavior towards Dad and Mom is too appalling. I want a divorce.
Wait a minute. It was just a lapse in judgment.
Plus, Owen is only 8. He needs his mom. I just visited Owen at the hospital, and he's made it clear he doesn't need a mom like you.
Even after receiving such a decisive blow from Phil, Linda desperately begged for reconciliation. But Phil steadfastly refused. Linda then turned to me with a fierce look, baring her teeth.
"You've made him leave me because of your meddling. How do you plan to take responsibility for this?"
That's on you. Besides, I heard you've always seen Phil as nothing but an ATM.
I had been sniffing around Linda, checking if she had any secrets by going through the wedding guest list and making calls.
And I'll be sure to inform your parents about all of this, so be prepared.
Stop! My dad hates dishonesty. If he finds out about this, I'll be disowned. Then who will take care of me?
You're an adult.
Why not work for yourself?
No way!
I've been living a comfortable housewife life on Phil's salary. I don't want to work now. It's too humiliating.
Faced with Linda's selfishness, both Raymond and Phil were dumbfounded, speechless.
You'd better experience some hardship and reflect on your actions.
Can't you do something? I'm sorry. I really am remorseful. You're the only one I can turn to now. Finally, Linda begged for forgiveness through her tears. However, I simply looked at her coldly, without giving any response. Perhaps thinking she had no other options left. She started to cry out.
I'm so sorry. Please help me.
Right there and then.
You know, Owen sought your help many times too. But you ignored all his pleas. Thinking only of yourself is really convenient, isn't it?
Hearing my words, Linda broke down crying, but I was unmoved and threw her out of the house. After that, Phil and Linda's divorce was finalized, and Linda was ordered to pay $30,000 in alimony. We also claimed $10,000 from her affair partner, the former teacher. But Linda, having drained her savings, got a job at a night bar only to be fired soon after due to her selfish nature. Currently, she's juggling jobs in road construction and cleaning. Phil still has to work abroad but has promised to return home whenever possible to see Owen. Until Phil returns, we, as a couple, have taken it upon ourselves to care for Owen. Filling the gap of the time we couldn't see him, watching Owen grow has brought true happiness to Raymond and me.
Kids are really at a disadvantage when their parents have low-paying jobs, aren't they?
Sandra, a mother of one of my son's teammates, always seemed to harbor an intense hostility towards me. To be honest, I never really liked her. One day, I was invited by her for lunch. Sensing something unpleasant, I decided to take the initiative.
Do you know about my father?
Days later, I showed up at the lunch hosted by Sandra in a luxury car, and her attitude completely changed. I'm Ashley, a 32-year-old office worker. I met my husband George through work. We hit it off and started dating. We're a close-knit family of 3, blessed with our son. He is Noah, 5 years old now. As he grew, he joined a local baseball team, and I found myself constantly busy with work and social commitments. To be honest, I've never been keen on mingling with the other moms from the team, but supporting my son's baseball games naturally led to more interactions. Among these new acquaintances was Sandra. Her child and Noah were good friends, so I tried to get along with her. But Sandra was a bit of a handful. She always dressed in high-end brands, and all she talked about was how elite her husband was. Because of that, she was somewhat ostracized by others. Still, being on the same team meant I couldn't just ignore her. Plus, our sons were friends, so I tried to accept her like everyone else did. One day, as usual, I was at a tea party hosted by Sandra. Calling it a tea party might be a stretch since it was really just a session to listen to her boast. It was never enjoyable. Sandra was usually the one doing all the talking, but that day she was strangely cheerful and even seemed interested in what others had to say. The friends around us were engaging in lively conversations, but I was suspicious. Wondering what was going on, Sandra suddenly gave me a sly smile and turned the conversation to me.
By the way, your husband is George, right? My husband said he saw him at a subsidiary the other day. Is that true?
As I looked puzzled by her question, her smile deepened, and she looked at me as if she was sizing me up.
I can't believe your husband works at a subsidiary.
Is there a problem? My husband works hard and is up for promotion.
I countered.
You know, you're always at our tea parties, right? I thought maybe it was taking a toll on your finances. Subsidiary jobs don't pay that well, I guess.
She looked at me with pity, and I couldn't help but feel annoyed. I confidently responded that I worked too and were not struggling. But she just laughed at my reply.
Both spouses working is a sign of poverty, you know. It's sad, having to work because your husband doesn't earn enough.
Her attitude was clearly mocking. I tried to explain that I work because I enjoy it, but she seemed to take it as me being defensive. She continued to insinuate that working couples are poor and that I must struggle to afford luxury brands. As I observed her, it dawned on me why she was in such a good mood. She had probably found something to ridicule me about today. I was genuinely upset. Whatever I said to her was dismissed as bravado, leaving me no room for a comeback. I couldn't understand why she suddenly treated me like an enemy. That day ended unresolved. Later, I was heading to the park with Noah. He was excited about possibly being chosen as the baseball team's ace for the next game. We were about to go to our usual practice spot when we ran into Sandra. Her son was usually a regular in the team, and I assumed it was the same that time. But she seemed downcast today. Curiously, I greeted her and asked, "Is something wrong with your son, Sandra?" Her response was sharp, pointing at my child.
Your kid took my son's position. All his hard work for nothing, beaten by a poor kid.
Seeing her hold her son, I realized why she treated me like an enemy at the tea party. Noah had taken the ace position her son had, and she resented me for it. Needless to say, Noah had also worked hard, and team positions are the coach's decision, not ours. However, she probably couldn't accept it with her high pride.
Hand that regular spot over to my son right now. I have all the money you could want. How much do you need?
Her words infuriated me. It was only natural, considering she was trying to buy Noah's hard-earned regular spot with money. Annoyed, I shot back at her.
We don't need your money. My son earned his regular spot through his own efforts. Besides, even your son wouldn't want a spot that was bought with money.
Her son looked down and nodded slightly at my words. Seeing that, I glared at her with frustration. Clearly, she didn't appreciate my attitude.
Impudent woman. You think you've won just because you're poor?
With those words, she roughly grabbed her son's hand and stormed off. Since that day, we hadn't talked much. It seemed like our friends noticed the change too. Due to the rumors spread by Sandra, everyone sided with her. I started being avoided even by friends I was close to and felt isolated even when cheering for Noah's baseball games. Despite that, I wanted to support him, so I tried to act as usual. Cheering loudly for Noah and trying to remain cheerful, I sometimes felt the stinging gazes from others. Yet, I refused to be intimidated by Sandra's threats and continued to stand my ground. I was aware of the rumors about me, mostly spread by her. In a way, That made me even more determined to maintain a strong stance. Then one day, as I was getting ready to leave after the game, Sandra approached me with some friends.
Hi. You're as stubborn as ever. Anyway, I'm hosting a dinner at my house. I've invited all members of the baseball team, so you're welcome to come if you want.
I frowned at her words. I never expected her to invite me, especially given our bad relationship.
I really want you to come. I don't want to continue like this. It's pitiful to see you standing alone. Your son will eventually realize what's happening. Imagine how he'll react when he knows his mother is suffering because of himself. You understand, don't you?
She kept looking at me with her challenging gaze. I simply replied without averting her eyes, understood.
That's great. And bring your husband too. It's good for him to socialize as well. Besides, you'd feel uneasy coming alone, right? My husband will be there too, so invite yours. I'll send the details and date in the team chat,
said she before turning and leaving. The friends around us looked anxious throughout the exchange. After watching Sandra's retreating figure, I was left with a bitter expression. Honestly, I had a bad feeling. It was clear she was plotting something. Therefore, before she could make her move, I decided to take the initiative. The day of the dinner arrived. George had an urgent work commitment, so he was going to be late. I called Sandra early in the morning to let her know. When she heard about George's emergency work, she laughed mockingly and said,
"It's sad when children suffer because their parents have low-paying jobs."
Her usual sarcasm, you know? After a while of her usual snide remarks, she hung up. I was upset but continued preparing to head to my parents' house, just a few minutes' walk from ours. Since George took my car for work, I decided to borrow a car from my parents. After getting the car, I headed straight to Sandra's place. Approaching the area, I joined a line of friends also driving there. Sandra was directing friends to a parking lot near her house, which she managed, so parking was hassle-free. When it was my turn, Sandra looked surprised at my car. No wonder, since I wasn't in my usual car but my parents' luxury vehicle.
Ashley! Hey, roll down the window! Why are you in such a luxury car? It's the same model as my family's car. Did you buy it just to compete with me?
Despite her assertive words, she looked shaken. I rolled down the window and greeted her smiling.
I had to borrow it from my parents. Sandra, do you know about my father?
She scowled at me.
I wouldn't know anything about a poor family.
Then I'll introduce you later,
I said, driving into the parking lot as instructed. She stood there, mouth agape, watching me leave. Thank you for the invitation today, I told Sandra after parking, handing her a cake I brought as a gift. On that day, I wasn't in my usual casual attire. I dressed appropriately for her dinner party, including some discreet branded accessories. She bit her lip and confronted me.
Explain yourself. How can someone like you afford high-end brand accessories and cakes from upscale shops?
Her loud voice drew the attention of friends around us. Amidst the gathered attention, I calmly answered her questions. I haven't mentioned it, but I'm the daughter of a film company president. This cake is recommended by my mother for attending your dinner. I chose the clothes myself. Is there a problem? Her mouth fell open again. She remained frozen for a while before finally speaking in a strained voice.
A film company? You mean where my husband works?
Unbelieving, I showed her a family photo with my father, who was also featured on the film company's website, thinking it would convince her. Still, she refused to believe.
That's a lie. It's just a photo you took when you met somewhere, right? I don't believe it. So, you rented a luxury car and wore high-end brand clothes, bringing a cake from a famous store, all because of the harassment, right?
No, I just chose an outfit and a gift suitable for the occasion. I borrowed the car from my parents because my husband had an urgent job.
A poor person like you being the daughter of a president is just a story, not reality. Stop joking. Do you really want to reconcile with me? I invited you here, offering a chance to apologize.
She yelled hysterically, throwing and stomping on the cake I brought as a gift. I was utterly appalled by her behavior, which was far from someone wanting to reconcile. As her shouting echoed through the yard, a man hurried out from the house, probably worried about her. It was her husband, David. When our eyes met, I smiled at him, which seemed to shock him.
What? The president's daughter here.
His surprise prompted Sandra to turn to him sharply. Despite her intimidating demeanor, David politely greeted me.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm David, nice to meet you. What brings you here today? Anything wrong with the president?
Worried, I turned to him and explained, I was invited by Sandra. His reaction was one of sheer astonishment.
Wow, you two are acquaintances, I didn't know that. The world is indeed small. How did you two meet?
Our sons are on the same baseball team. There was a little conflict when my son replaced your son as a regular, but Sandra invited me here today to make amends. Seems I'm not welcome, though. He then turned to Sandra, suspecting something.
Sandra, tell me. The poor person you always talk about is.
She started sweating profusely. Seemingly she had been bad-mouthing me at home too. Realizing that, I narrowed my eyes. She got in panic and started to deny everything, clinging to David.
It's not her. She's the daughter of a film company president. It can't be. We're actually good friends, right?
Ignoring her pleading glance, I remained expressionless. After what she had done, I had no intention of saving her face. As I was about to retort, someone tapped my shoulder. When I looked back, there was my husband, George. Sorry for being late. I finished work earlier than I thought, so I came. Is something wrong? He had a suspicious look on his face. He looked at Sandra and David, and it seemed like he had noticed something as he spoke. Remember me? We talked at work recently.
Of course, you're the upcoming president.
Then, George blushed and said, Not sure yet. He scratched his head. Seeing their exchange, Sandra was speechless with shock. I picked up the trampled cake and handed it back to her. Do you believe me now? Visibly shaken, she tried to appease me with an ingratiating tone.
I had no idea of your status. I'm so sorry for everything.
She pleaded, but I shook my head. Don't worry about it. We were never close friends to begin with. There's no point in pretending now. My response visibly shocked her, prompting David to ask in a low tone. What's that about? He said. Frightened, Sandra looked at me with a pale face. Sandra has been making snide remarks to me for a while now. She even complained when our son earned a regular spot on the team, offering to pay for it, and when I refused, she started harassing me. She invited me today to make amends, but it's fine. We're leaving. I laid out Sandra's actions to David, who then glared at her angrily. After sharing a smile with George, we left the scene. Following the incident at Sandra's house, the harassment stopped. Besides, the story spread among the team mothers, isolating her instead. The other mothers, seeing her downfall, suddenly started cozying up to me. I couldn't bring myself to like them though. Fond of being in a group, Sandra might be struggling, but I had no intention of helping. It was all her doing. Eventually, Sandra left the baseball team as her misdeeds were exposed. That caused David to be furious with her. Her access to money was also reduced. Her misconduct became neighborhood gossip. Although they were some exaggerated, given her character, I couldn't help but wonder if some were true. However, when whispers of relief about her not getting divorced circulated, I felt a pang of sympathy. Time passed, and Noah moved up to elementary school. Sandra's son, apparently attending a private school, meant no future interactions between us. Noah continued to excel in baseball, and George and I worked even harder to ensure he could pursue his passion without any hindrance.
The poor couple, they must be here to mooch off their parents since they have no money.
The peaceful Christmas atmosphere was shattered by my brother's harsh words. As he continued to spout insults and demanded more alcohol, I stayed silent. Then, "Do I look familiar to you?" My husband finally spoke up. "What? I have no reason to know you." My brother sneered condescendingly. "Is that so? Well then." Little did my brother know, these words would be his downfall. my name is Ava. I work in event planning at a company. I love interacting with people and having fun, and I consider my job my true calling. I've always prioritized work over romance. But there's someone who mocks me for it. That's my brother, Thomas. He works in a prestigious department at a top-tier company. He's always been brilliant, but his pride is too high, and he's looked down on me for years.
You prioritize work over romance, and you're still single? That's just pathetic. You're just a poor, desperate woman living with her parents. Don't you dare become a burden on me in the future. A lonely life like yours is just tragic.
Thomas never misses a chance to insult me, calling me a workaholic spinster. Our parents try to scold him, but he never shows any remorse, insisting he's only stating the truth. I used to argue back, but it only made things worse. Now, I just ignore him, as we rarely see each other. Despite his taunts, I recently met a man I liked. His name is Timothy. He's a contact person from a client company, unassuming but gentle and meticulous in his work. I was hoping to get closer to him, but then I learned from someone at his company that he had a girlfriend. Her name is Natalie. She's a striking beauty at the reception of his company, well known but also notorious for her relationships. Though it includes some bad language, there are rumors that she's dating more than one person at once. I've also heard that my company has also victims of her. I was curious about her, but I kept my distance, feeling it wasn't my place to interfere. One day, Timothy seemed really down during a meeting.
Timothy, you don't look well. This isn't urgent. Should we reschedule and I'll send you the details later?
No, it's okay. I'm sorry for worrying you. Let's start. He tried to appear upbeat, but it was clear he wasn't himself.
The budget looks about right, don't you think?
Timothy? Timothy?
Oh, sorry. What were we talking about again? I apologize.
Seeing him so distracted, I decided to call off the meeting. Let's stop here for today, Timothy. I'll send you the materials and the points we need to review later.
Ava, I'm really sorry for being such a hassle.
Don't worry about it. You look unwell, maybe you should go home and rest.
Thank you so much, but if I don't stay busy, I'll just keep thinking about it.
His words struck a chord with me, and I couldn't help but say, if there's something on your mind, feel free to talk about it. It might help to get it off your chest.
I shouldn't burden you with this, Ava. I'm here to listen, no matter what it is. I'd like to help you feel a bit better so you can focus on work.
I tried to lighten the mood, and he managed a small smile.
Thank you. Maybe I will talk. You see, I had a girlfriend I was thinking of marrying, but she just quit her job to marry another man.
What?
Natalie? I hadn't seen her at the reception lately. You knew about Natalie? She spent way more than she earned, and she often pressured me for expensive gifts. I recently told her to be more mindful about her spending. Then she suddenly cut off all contact. Today, I found out she quit her job.
His story was heartbreaking, and I didn't know what to say.
I called her, and she answered, but just to say she doesn't need a man who won't pay for her. She threatened to accuse me of stalking if I called again. I was just a cash cow, a victim of her cheating. I'm sorry, this is such a depressing story.
Seeing his forced smile, I felt a surge of anger towards her. What's her deal? How can she treat people like that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I got a little carried away.
He looked surprised at my outburst, but soon smiled.
Thank you. You're angry on my behalf. I was too shocked to really get angry. You're right, it's okay to be mad. Ava, thanks for listening. I feel a bit better now.
He seemed a bit more upbeat. Timothy, are you free after work today? Times like these call for a drink to blow off some steam. I invited him for drinks, wanting to cheer him up. Sorry. I don't mean to impose. Seeing his shocked face, I suddenly felt embarrassed. No, thank you. After making you listen to all this, and now you're being so considerate. I guess we need to finish our work by the end of the day, then. He said with a smile and then looked down at the documents. I resumed the meeting, feeling a mix of embarrassment and happiness. After that day, we got closer. We started chatting over messages and hanging out on our days off. Our ways of thinking were similar, and I enjoyed his company. Just when I started wanting to spend more time with him, my brother suddenly announced he was bringing his fiancée home. I didn't want to see my brother, but my parents insisted I at least greet his fiancée. I was shocked when I saw who it was. His fiancée was Natalie.
What? Natalie? You're marrying my brother?
I blurted out in surprise.
Oh, you're the girl from the event company that often comes to our office. Thomas's sister, right?
She said with a smug smile. Choosing my brother over Timothy, Natalie, you really have no taste.
What?
Natalie was momentarily surprised, but then smirked. So you knew about him?
Of course, I'd choose Thomas, a rising star in a top company, over some plain office worker. What's wrong with choosing a man with better specs?
She spoke without a hint of remorse. My brother joined in the conversation. That Timothy guy, I've met him a few times through work. Plain and unimpressive. I'm obviously a better catch, so of course, she chose me. My brother laughed smugly, with Natalie nodding in agreement. I was disgusted by their attitude. Even my parents looked disappointed at their behavior.
I refuse to acknowledge you two who are so arrogant that you look down on others as part of this family. Go ahead with your marriage or whatever, but don't ever come back.
Dad said quietly, effectively disowning them. Enraged, my brother retorted. Even if you disown me, I won't be bothered. Kicking out your eldest son, you'll regret it later. He left with her. I felt relieved that I wouldn't have to see my brother again. But at the same time, I was troubled about whether to tell Timothy about this. After much thought, I decided to talk to him who had the right to know. I called him after work. Ava, what's wrong? You look so serious. He looked at me with concern, and I gathered my courage to tell him.
Actually, my brother is getting married, and his fiancée is Natalie.
What?
It seems they met through your company. I accidentally brought you up. She said choosing my successful brother over a regular employee like you was the right choice.
Yeah.
Both my brother and Natalie kept looking down on me and my parents, so my dad disowned them. Is that so? I'm sorry for burdening you with this story.
No, thank you for telling me. I'd be lying if I said I'm not shocked, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I was surprised by how composed he seemed. Since then, I've realized I was just dazzled by her beauty and didn't see her true colors. Hearing about her marriage really got to me at first, but thanks to you, Ava, I've bounced back. Thank you for telling me. Seeing his smile made me feel relieved. Ava, it might sound odd to say this now, but would you stay with me?
What?
I was shocked by his sudden proposal. I enjoy being with you, Ava. It's calming. Would you consider a serious relationship, with marriage in mind?
Yes, I would be honored.
I was truly happy to be dating the man I admired, Timothy. After 2 years of dating, we got married. On our first Christmas as a married couple, we visited my parents' house. Dad was happy to see us and started drinking with him. Dad loves alcohol but can't handle it well. Sure enough, he quickly got drunk, so Timothy took him to another room to take care of him. Right after that, the doorbell rang, and there stood my brother and his wife, who were supposed to be estranged. My brother knew about Dad's weakness for alcohol. He must have timed his visit, guessing Dad would be drunk from drinking since the afternoon on Christmas. Mom, knowing they were supposed to be estranged, was hesitant to let them in. Barging in, my brother said, "Your dad's probably useless by now. Hurry up and get us some drinks, and serve some fancy food." Natalie went straight to the bathroom without asking. She said I'll use the restroom. While Mom and I stood dumbfounded. What's all this noise about? Timothy came out from the back. My brother glared at Timothy and barked. Who the hell are you? Oh, are you Ava's brother? I'm her husband, Timothy. My brother looked at him and sneered.
A perfect match for a plain Jane like Ava. Did you two come to mooch off your parents' house? I don't want to see your faces on Christmas.
Get out of here. My brother had mocked Timothy for being plain and unimpressive, but he didn't seem to remember his face clearly. After telling us to leave, he started demanding food and drinks from Mom. Timothy, who had been watching my brother quietly, spoke up.
Do you really not recognize me?
What?
I have no reason to know you.
My brother said, looking puzzled at Timothy.
Is that so? You don't remember me. Then, we'll have to cancel our future business dealings.
What? Business? Are you out of your mind? My brother mocked him, just as Natalie walked in.
Sorry for the wait. Why is Timothy here?
Natalie was surprised to see Timothy.
He's Ava's husband. He's babbling some nonsense about business dealings.
What? You married this girl, Timothy? Whatever. As if someone like you could affect Thomas's company's business deals.
Natalie laughed mockingly. Timothy, looking exasperated, said,
Do you remember my last name?
What are you talking about?
It's Smith, right? And the name of the president of the parent company of your former employer?
What? What's with you all of a sudden?
I think it was
Smith.
Wait. Smith?
My brother's face went pale in shock.
Oh please, Thomas. Smith is such a common last name. There's no way this guy is related to the CEO.
Natalie said dismissively, but Timothy pressed on.
Unfortunately for you, I am the CEO's son. Luckily, there are several Smiths in the company and its parent company, so my identity stayed hidden.
What? Really?
Yep. I worked at a subsidiary for training, but after getting married, I returned to the parent company. I'm now responsible for several important projects, including the dealings with Thomas's company.
My brother and Natalie were speechless, their faces ashen.
Thomas's company is indeed considered top tier in the industry, but that seems to have bred some arrogant employees. I've heard they've been making unreasonable demands, so I've been thinking about revisiting our dealings.
Wait, Timothy, why didn't you tell me you're the son of a major company CEO?
Natalie asked in a fluster.
I planned to tell you once we were engaged. I told Ava after we decided to get married.
True, he told me after the proposal. I was surprised, but titles don't really matter to me. I answered nonchalantly, and Natalie screamed in disbelief.
What? If I had known he was the CEO's son, I would have married him. What do you mean by that?
My brother, still pale, confronted Natalie. Timothy, looking exasperated, said,
Please leave, the disowned family members.
You're not welcome here. He ushered them out. My brother, looking pathetic, begged to reconsider the business dealings, but Timothy ignored him and closed the door. The ousted couple argued outside for a while before fleeing under the watchful eyes of the neighbors. It seems that he ran home because he was worried about what his neighbors would notice. Later, Timothy canceled the business dealings with my brother's company. My brother, already known for his poor attitude towards colleagues, was fired for losing a major client. He boasted about finding a new job quickly, but his bad reputation made it difficult. After that incident, Natalie started pestering Timothy, saying,
I want us to get back together.
Or even,
I don't mind being just a mistress.
Started following him around. However, when Timothy threatened, I'll sue you for stalking, she finally stopped. Both my brother and his wife were extravagant spenders. Even after his dismissal, they couldn't adjust their lifestyle and quickly became engulfed in debt. My brother repeatedly reached out for help, but I ignored all his requests. Eventually, tired of his constant contact, I deleted all his contact information. I have no idea what happened to them after that. I vowed never to become someone who looks down on others like them. Together with Timothy, I decided to build a happy and respectful family.
I'm Lynn. Recently, I got married to my husband, Scott, and now I have a sister-in-law named Abigail, but I just got this weird call from her. Lynn, you listening? I am, but I didn't quite catch that. Okay, I'll say it again. Your cruiser? I crashed it into an iceberg. Yeah, still doesn't make sense. Needless to say, there's a lot to unpack here. First off, I don't own a cruiser. And what's this about an iceberg? You wouldn't see icebergs unless you're near the Arctic or Antarctic. We're in Los Angeles, so I doubt there's an iceberg nearby. But knowing Abigail, she probably doesn't realize that. She's a bit different in many ways. She's either confused about something or trying to tease me, one of the two. Thinking this, I asked Abigail again. Did you really crash into an iceberg? Yeah, I intentionally hit the iceberg and sank it. Abigail answered, laughing. Annoyed by her tone, I asked her a bit more sternly. Can you explain a bit more? Len, you're so silly. Fine, I'll explain. Abigail started her explanation, still laughing. Her story began when I visited Scott's family home. The reason for going to Scott's place was simple. We had a family meeting. Naturally, Abigail was there too. As soon as she saw me, she said, Wow, you look kinda Japanese. My grandma's Japanese. My grandma is Japanese, and my grandpa is American. Their daughter, my mom, married an American, my dad, and they had me and my brother. Later, when I was in upper elementary school, we moved to Birmingham, Alabama, due to my father's job. My appearance is a bit different from typical Americans, more East Asian, like Japanese. I've been teased about it a few times, so I was a bit on guard, thinking Abigail might do the same. But Abigail just said, Really? That's so cool. You're really cute. She complimented me like that. In a moment, I felt relieved. What if they hadn't accepted me? That's what I had been worrying about. Thank you. Looking forward to getting along. Sure thing. That's how I talked with Abigail, and then Victoria, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, joined the conversation. Lynn, you lived in Los Angeles, right? Do you still have a house there? The house we lived in is occupied by someone else now, but we do have relatives' homes there. Oh, I see. But as long as you have relatives' homes there, no need to worry. Victoria seemed oddly pleased. Then Abigail chimed in. That's what I was thinking too. I had a bad feeling about this, but an opportunity to travel with Victoria and her family isn't likely to come up often. So I didn't make much of it and let the conversation flow. However, Victoria and Abigail kept asking odd questions afterwards. About the kind of house I lived in Los Angeles, the kind of car I drove. Finally, they even asked about my relatives' homes in Los Angeles. I replied that I lived in a house with a pool and my uncle lives by a river. Hearing this, Victoria and her group laughed maliciously. That's when I realized they were planning to use my relatives to take a trip to the West Coast. Oh no, they're planning to take full advantage of me. But it's hard to complain to people you just met, and complaining might jeopardize their acceptance of the marriage. After much thought, I decided to bear it for now. After all, the chance to go to the West Coast wasn't immediate. By the time it came around, we'd probably be in a position to have a proper discussion. For the moment, I decided not to touch on the subject. Somehow I managed to get through the introductions. At the end, Abigail asked for my contact information, which I regretfully shared. That was a big mistake. After that, she started contacting me more frequently. At first, it was about once a week, so I just went along with it or declined casually. But gradually, she began to reach out more often. It became a hassle, and I started making convenient excuses like being at work or driving. Once Scott and I filed our marriage application, Abigail became completely unreserved. I tried to accommodate her a few times, but twice or thrice a week was just too much. And yet today she called again saying, "Hey Lynn, want to hang out?" It's already 8 p.m. I have work tomorrow. What? You can't make it work, right? No, I can't. Abigail finished high school and works part-time. She probably has more free time, but I'm a full-time employee. I work weekdays from Monday till evening, and my only days off are the weekends and the holidays. Now that I'm married, I have household responsibilities too. I just don't have the leisure to accommodate Abigail. Sorry, I have a meeting early tomorrow morning. Stingy, even though you're rich. With those words, the call ended. Since then, I haven't heard from Abigail. What's this about being rich? I work full-time, but it's not like I earn a high salary. I couldn't make sense of it. The next day, I got a call from Victoria. Lynn, want to go shopping together? I'm pretty busy with work, I replied nonchalantly. Then Victoria said something strange. You're rich, right, Lynn? I wanted to consult you about some brands I'm interested in. Wait, did I just hear something odd? Something about being rich? Wondering if I misheard, I asked Victoria to clarify. Sorry, did you just say something about being rich? Yes, I did. What about it? I'm not rich. What? But you lived in Los Angeles, right? Victoria said, as if it were the most natural thing. Does living in Los Angeles automatically make one rich? If that logic holds, does it mean all Los Angeles residents are wealthy? All these thoughts were swirling in my head. As I sighed, Victoria asked, What's wrong? Just a misunderstanding. I'm not rich. What? Even though you lived in a house with a pool? That's common in California. Oh, really? Yes. Sorry, I must have misunderstood. With those words, Victoria abruptly hung up. I was left puzzled. What was that all about? No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't find an answer. When I discussed this with Scott, he talked to Victoria and Abigail for me. According to Scott, here's what happened. Learning that I lived in Los Angeles, and specifically in a house with a pool, they assumed it must be in Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills means wealth, so they concluded I must be wealthy. Indeed, if one lives in Beverly Hills, it's not unreasonable to think they might be well off. But I just lived in Los Angeles, not Beverly Hills. So Victoria and her group's assumption were flawed. But they believed what they thought, hence the probing about my house. I did find it odd when they asked me those questions, but I couldn't lie. So I told the truth, which unfortunately fed their misconceptions. A house with a pool might be common in California, but it's almost unheard of here in Birmingham. It seems Victoria and her group misunderstood and thought I was wealthy. They probably thought being rich means they could benefit from my marriage. They could expect money gifts from me. Anyway, if I cozy up to them, something good might come of it. That seems to be what they were thinking. That's why they were contacting me so often. Eventually, Scott clarified the misunderstanding, but Victoria and her group seemed to grumble about it. Well, if I had been a rich girl, maybe we could have gone on trips or partied every night. I can understand their disappointment when all that became impossible. But still, it was good that the misunderstanding was cleared up. Sometime later, when I went to discuss the wedding plans with Victoria's family, if the misunderstanding had persisted, Victoria would have wanted a lavish wedding. But she actually said to me, "What kind of wedding are you planning? You're not going for something too extravagant, right?" "Yeah, I think a small family-only affair would be nice." "Right. You have to be mindful of expenses now." She seemed concerned, which was nice. However, Abigail still seemed to have her doubts about me. She didn't participate much in the wedding discussion, which was a bit disappointing. But even without Abigail's input, our wedding was still happening. A year later, we managed to have a lovely wedding. On the wedding day, my parents, who live in Birmingham, managed to make it in time for the ceremony. But my grandparents from Los Angeles couldn't come due to the difficulty of travel. Instead, my Uncle Taylor, my mother's brother, came. He said he would take pictures to show to my grandparents. As I was waiting in the dressing room a few hours before the ceremony, Taylor came to see me. "Lynn, how are you doing?" Taylor's company deals with boat rentals, handling cruisers and pleasure boats, popular among young Americans. He showed me a photo saying, "Look at this, I bought it." It was a cruiser in the photo, clearly expensive at a glance. "How much?" This much." Taylor typed a number on his phone. $3 million? What? It seemed he didn't catch what I said. Taylor has some hearing issues due to an accident in his youth, and speaking a bit louder helps him understand better. As I was marveling at how he could afford such a sum, Taylor showed me another photo. "Lynn, this is a wedding present for you." "For me?" It was a picture of a pleasure boat. According to Taylor, his company had recently replaced some boats. He had kept one of them aside for me. It was currently at his riverside home, and I could use it when I visited. "Thank you." While I was talking about this, Abigail entered the dressing room. "What's this? What did you get?" Abigail had a sly smile on her face. Seems like she was eavesdropping outside the dressing room. If I tell Abigail about the pleasure boat, she'll definitely insist on being taken for a ride, so I'd rather not tell her. But it seems she already overheard, so it might be hard to hide it. Reluctantly, I said, "Taylor gave me a boat." "A boat? Who just gives away a boat like that?" "It's a second-hand boat from Taylor's company. Instead of disposing of it, he gave it to me." "Huh, interesting." Abigail didn't seem very interested. In a way, that was a relief. After Taylor left the room, I moved in front of the mirror to do my makeup. Glancing through my mirror, I noticed Abigail looking at the photo Taylor had brought. Maybe she's more interested than she lets on. As I was thinking this, Abigail had disappeared. Soon after, the wedding was over. On the way back in the car, Victoria said to me, "Lynn, did you inform Grandma about your marriage?" "Of course I did. I even sent her photos of my wedding dress." "That's good, but don't you think it would be better to visit her?" As I was fearing this turn of events, Victoria continued, "I'd like to greet your grandpa and grandma too, but they're in Los Angeles. That's why I was thinking, why don't we combine it with a family trip to the West Coast?" It seems Victoria hadn't given up on the trip idea. It was a hard proposition to refuse. As I was thinking about how to decline, Victoria said, "Actually, I talked to Taylor." "What? With Taylor?" "Yes, and he said he'd love for us to visit." "Did Taylor catch that in all the noise?" "Huh? That's something you overcome with willpower." I'm pretty sure Taylor didn't get it. So I refused, not wanting to inconvenience Taylor. Then Victoria frowned suddenly. "Oh, poor Grandpa and Grandma. Couldn't attend the wedding, can't see their grandchild." "Please don't say it like that." "Don't you want to see them?" "I do, but..." "See, then let's go." In the end, I couldn't refuse. Pushed by Victoria, we decided to go to the West Coast for our honeymoon. But I wasn't unhappy about it. I would get to see Grandpa and Grandma after a long time, and we could play in the river near Taylor's house. There's also the pleasure boat, so it's sure to be fun. Might as well enjoy it to the fullest. With that mindset, I decided to go have a good time. A few months after the wedding, we used our summer vacation to travel to the West Coast. When I explained the situation to Taylor, he happily agreed to host us. So Scott, Victoria, Abigail, and I headed to Taylor's house in Los Angeles. Father-in-law couldn't join due to work commitments. Still, it was our first family trip since getting married. I wanted to use this opportunity to bond with Victoria and Abigail. That was my plan. The day we arrived was spent joyfully reuniting with Grandpa and Grandma and introducing Scott to them. I also introduced Victoria and Abigail, and we all enjoyed a family party. Abigail, with her inherent cheerfulness, quickly got along with Taylor's family. Victoria seemed to be having fun too, and we felt a step closer to being a real family. That's what I thought. The next day, my brother Kevin, who lives alone in San Francisco, came to visit late in the morning. Lynn. Kevin, how's school? For context, Kevin is a college student. It's the weekend, right? I'm off, so I came to say hello. I'll introduce you to Scott and the others. We talked, but I couldn't find Victoria and Abigail anywhere. Scott, who was helping my aunt, was there, but not Victoria and her group. Scott, where are Victoria and the others? I don't know. Scott shrugged. That's when I suddenly got a call from Abigail. Hello, Len? Abigail, where are you? My brother just arrived. Before I could finish, Abigail burst into laughter. You're so laid back, Len. What's going on, Abigail? Do you know where we are? I was just looking for you. Where are you? That's a secret. Just wanted to tell you something. Tell me what? Your cruiser. I deliberately crashed it into an iceberg and sank it. Abigail laughed loudly. That was the extent of what Abigail explained over the phone. So that's what happened. Got it? I understood the story, but what about my cruiser? Thinking it over, I remembered something. From the wedding day, Taylor had given me a pleasure boat. That time, Abigail was eavesdropping on our conversation. She saw the photo of the cruiser and heard me talking about getting a boat, so she might have been confused. Then I tried clarifying. You know, if it's my boat, it's at my house. The pleasure boat I received is at Taylor's house. I'm not sure of it since I glanced at it. No, it's different. Your cruiser sank right in front of me. It's hard to say, but I don't own a cruiser. What? There was a photo. You were talking about the boat being a gift. The boat I received was the pleasure boat. Pleasure what? Right, Abigail is a bit different. She wouldn't know the difference between a pleasure boat and a cruiser. A pleasure boat is for fun, and a cruiser is for staying overnight. What do you mean? It means the cruiser you're talking about sinking isn't mine. What? Whose cruiser is it then? That's what I wanted to know. But from her talk about the photo, it's probably Taylor's cruiser. As I was thinking this, I heard Taylor screaming over the phone, shouting things like, "What have you done?" and "What's going on?" Then I realized Abigail must take it for my cruiser and had sunk Taylor's $3 million cruiser. Abigail, don't move. Why? What's wrong? This is Los Angeles, not some rural area like Alabama. Sinking a boat and running away is a big deal here. Really? Yes, police here deal with serious crimes. They're not like the sheriffs in Alabama. You understand? Oh, no. I could hear Abigail crying. She seemed to be pleading with Victoria nearby. Mom, help me. I don't know, Abigail. You did it on your own. Help me. I just wanted to be on the cruiser. It seemed like they were passing the blame to each other. Well, as long as they stay put, that's fine. I quickly contacted Scott and headed to the marina where Taylor's cruiser was. The marina was a few minutes' drive away. Arriving at the scene, several police officers were already there. I talked to a stunned Taylor. He told me this. Early in the morning, Abigail and Victoria had asked him to go on the cruiser, but their strong Alabama accent made their English hard to understand. Taylor thought that's what they wanted from their difficult-to-understand English. Meanwhile, I asked Abigail for her side of the story, and she said, I kept telling Taylor to let me on Len's cruiser. You actually said that? He didn't quite understand me. Well, I see. So I kept repeating Len's cruiser to Taylor. I think I get what she's trying to say, but I doubt that would get the message across. So I checked with Taylor about what he heard. He said, Lisa Cruiser. Now that I think about it, the pronunciation isn't too far off. And with Abigail's strong Alabama accent, it's not surprising it was misheard. But leasing implies long-term rental, Normally, one would refuse such a request. But Taylor had realized last night that Abigail was a bit unusual. She kept repeating, "Lease a cruiser." Taylor, out of kindness, thought she wanted to borrow a cruiser. As a result, he let Abigail onto his own cruiser, and she misunderstood it as mine. That seems to be what happened. "But why did you want to sink my cruiser?" "I thought you lied about not being rich, getting cruisers and stuff." She thought I was actually rich enough to receive a cruiser, but was hiding it. Abigail wanted to get back at me for lying. Even if it was out of jealousy or feeling lied to, sinking a cruiser is too extreme. But I still had questions, so I asked her, "How did you manage to operate the cruiser? You don't have a boating license, do you?" "I just kind of figured it out by watching Taylor." "So you guessed?" "Yeah, I fiddled around and it started moving. And then I couldn't stop it, crashed into the dock, and it started sinking. So I thought I might as well sink it." According to Abigail, her plan was just to cause a little trouble. But the cruiser moved more easily than expected and hit the dock. It then started sinking and she panicked. But her coming to me with this was infuriating. Yet, if left alone, it would become a huge problem, and she didn't think to call the police in her panic. How could she convey this situation to me and give me a scare? Abigail thought of this. There was a movie about a ship sinking after hitting an iceberg. She figured she could use that as a reference, saying it hit an iceberg would surely cause panic. Besides, that movie was a Hollywood film. Hollywood is in Los Angeles, so they couldn't have filmed it without nearby icebergs. Therefore, she assumed there must be icebergs nearby. With this bizarre and whimsical reasoning, Abigail lied about hitting an iceberg and sinking. Moreover, she thought if she said such a thing, I would be worried about her safety. Then she expected me to rush over in a panic. Seeing my panicked state would be enough revenge for her. I understood why she lied about hitting an iceberg, but her reasoning was ludicrously flawed. Afterwards, both Abigail and Victoria got a scolding from Scott. Fortunately, there was no damage to other boats, so paying for the repairs settled the matter.
"And after all that, why do I have to work for a river cleaning company?"
Abigail cried in Birmingham. "It's obvious. The repair costs were substantial."
"But there are other jobs."
"Well, you wanted to be on a boat, right? This river cleaning company lets you do just that."
"I wanted to be on a cruiser, not just any boat."
In the end, Abigail was left crying while working for the river cleaning company, picking up trash from the boat. It was tough work, but ideal for her who wanted to be on a boat. For me, there was a slight upside. Actually, Victoria started working too, for Abigail's sake. This meant she stopped contacting me as much. Of course, I want to get along with them. But for now, it's important they work and earn money, especially for Taylor's sake. Otherwise, I'd be in trouble. After all, I haven't even been on that $3 million cruiser yet.